So there's a medicinal plant out there that really wants to get your attention. Let's talk about it. So isn't it amazing when you're out walking around in nature, out in the forest or walking along the river, and you see the beautiful, majestic trees and the delicate, intricate loveliness of the little flowers and the verdant green of the leaves and the, holy cow, what was that? And all of a sudden, you feel this terrible shooting, burning pain in your leg, and you look down and you've been stung by stinging nettle, right? I'm Dr. Patrick Jones from the HomeGrown Herbal School of Botanical Medicine, and I want to talk a little bit about stinging nettle today. Stinging nettle is a really, really fantastic medicinal plant. It's really common, grows just almost everywhere. Here's a map we've got showing all the places in North America where it grows, and you'll notice there's a couple of white states and provinces up in Canada here, and those people are just in denial. Yeah, they either haven't noticed or they're too embarrassed to confess that they also have thriving stinging nettle populations. And just about every other temperate place on the planet also has stinging nettle distribution that looks just like this. So many places to go, so many people to sting. It's a very extroverted, people-friendly kind of plant, wants to be with everybody. It looks sort of like a mint. It has sort of squarish stems like mint family plants have, but not quite as square. The leaves come off, at 90-degree angles. You got opposite leaves coming, two north and south, and then two east and west, and two north and south, which is also very minty. But the easy way to tell that it's not a mint is that it stings. And the stinging is pretty intense. It actually has little hypodermic needles all over the surface of the plant, on the stems, on the leaves. And these little needles, when they poke into you, inject formic acid and some other chemistry that is really very irritating and very burning. In fact, the name Urtica, this genus, means burning or stinging. And so it's a pretty unpleasant experience. But that said, interestingly, that stinging experience is also a medicinal action. Yeah, that's right. Stinging nettle stinging you is actually a medicinal action. And if you notice as you're walking in the woods and the rotten stuff stings your knee, after a few minutes, your knee stops hurting. And I don't mean from the sting, I mean from the sore knee you had when you started your hike. If you have arthritis or joint pain, inflammation, those kinds of things, the sting of stinging nettle is actually a therapeutic for those issues. And for thousands of years, people have been intentionally stinging themselves to relieve the pain of arthritis and joint inflammation. It's called urtication therapy, right? From Urtica, which is the genus of stinging nettle. And so, they sting themselves, and then that formic acid has some histamine modulating functions. It has some anti-inflammatory functions. It also mostly has some significant impact on neurotransmitters that are involved in the transmission of pain. So things like serotonin and substance P, chemicals like that your finger gives the message to tell your brain that this bad thing happened. Those chemicals are very intimately involved in those nerve conduction functions. And if you turn those off, or you get in the way or interfere with them, then you don't hurt, right? And it's not just like for a minute that your achy joints don't hurt. It's for days and days after that sting, And so it's been an intentional thing for a long time for people that have joint pain and arthritis. The leaf is also really medicinal internally. You don't have to sting yourself. That's the good news. The leaf is fantastic medicine, and it does all kinds of things. It's a good diuretic. It's got some mild antibiotic properties, so it's very good for bladder infections, urinary tract infections. It's good for ulcers. Again, some of that's due to the antibiotic, but some of the other constituents that it has also help that ulcer to heal and help to interfere with the bacterial infection that it's causing the ulcer, the Helicobacter pylori. So it's good for ulcers. It's an anti-inflammatory generally, so it's good for arthritis and inflammation generally internally. And let's see, what else is it good for? Oh, it's a fantastic antihistamine. So really good for allergy symptoms. It decreases histamine production. It interferes with histamine release from the mast cells. And it, as if that wasn't enough, it also inhibits the cells that would like to uptake the histamine and be offended by it from uptaking the histamine and being offended by it. And so basically you quit sneezing. You quit having that allergic reaction. And so it's very good. If somebody has allergies, seasonal allergies especially, it's just silly not to be taking a cup of nettles twice a day. That's just silly. In a cup of tea, I mean. What else is it good for? It's good for psoriasis. It's good for eczema. It's good for a dozen other things. Really a phenomenal plant. And the leaf's not the only thing that's good for stuff. The seed is also good. And the seed comes off in these little bunches off of the stem where the leaves attach. And the seed is a very good plant for distressed kidneys, for weakened, damaged, low-functioning kidneys that are having a hard time. Nettle seed is a remarkable medicine for that. I've had a lot of cases in the veterinary practice, and some cases in the naturopath practice too, where I saw nettle seed make a significant difference in the blood values of BUN and creatinine in animals that were having a hard time processing and eliminating those things. And so I don't know that it restores and cures a kidney that's really damaged, but it certainly helps that kidney do what it can do with what it has better, and in the early cases of stress, in the early stages of stress and disease and problems, certainly nettle's going to be beneficial for helping that kidney get through that experience. The root's also medicinal, right? So the leaf was good, seeds are good. Well, guess what? The root's good too. The root is mostly used for prostate enlargement, benign prostatic hyperplasia. So non-cancerous swelling of the prostate. And it's quite good for that. But I'll tell you, even if you don't have any of those problems, you're out of your mind if you're not taking nettles every day. It's a phenomenal nutritive. It's a tremendous source of vitamins and minerals and nutrients that are really hard to get in regular food. They call it food, the stuff they're selling us. It's not really food anymore. But nettles is still food, okay? And, just as an overall health tonic and nutrition source, putting a teaspoon of nettles in your morning smoothie, and if you do that a couple of times a day, that is so good for you. My wife is a midwife, and one of her standard things to do was she was having the ladies that were expecting taking nettles, because it's really good for them. It's really nutritious, safe during pregnancy. I've had all kinds of people that I recommend, just what I just recommended to you, take some nettles. And I get all kinds of reports of how much better they feel generally about everything. Fewer allergy symptoms, less inflammation, less tiredness, more energy. And a lot of that is from medicinal properties, but a lot of it's just the nutrition. You take a plant as complicated as nettles, and it really is, like many herbs, like most herbs, it really is just a buffet for your body to choose what it wants today. Oh, that looks good. I'll have something. Oh, I want some of that today, right? And it gives the body this beautiful palette of resources that it can use for whatever's going on with it. So what's the dose? Well, the dose of nettles, the powder, the dry powder, and how do you make the powder? You just chop down the nettles and dry it, just air dry it, throw it on a shelf. And when it's dry, throw it in your blender and grind it into a powder. So the dose of nettles for an adult of that powder is going to be like a rounded teaspoon or so. And if you did that twice a day for maintenance and nutritive stuff, that's fantastic. If you're fighting something active, if you've got some allergy stuff and you really want to get a handle on it, or if you got some inflammation, you really want to get a handle on it, do it 3 times a day. That's great. But really a phenomenal tonic, really a phenomenal nutritive, really a phenomenal medicine. And honestly, we're just scratching the surface. I mean, it does so many other things. We just did a new lesson on Nettles, a new monograph for the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine. And we talk about all kinds of other things that it does in a lot of detail of how it works and why it works and how to use it, when to use it, what to use it for, what to use it with. Sometimes it combines well with other things. And it's just a really wonderful, exciting topic, this plant and all the amazing things it can do. If you're interested in learning more about herbs, we'd sure encourage you to have a look at the HomeGrown Herbalist School. You can learn more about it at homegrownherbalist.com. And I'm Dr. Patrick Jones. I really appreciate you listening. If you haven't subscribed already, we'd sure appreciate it if you did. There's a little button down there. Somewhere's a little button. And of course, there's like buttons and there's share buttons. If you know someone who's a human and has a body, they would really benefit from this video. So if you know anybody like that, send this video to them and then they can put some nettles in their smoothie and feel better. So until next time, I'm Dr. Patrick Jones. Thanks for listening. You know, people ask me all the time, Doc, if you could only have 5 herbs, what would those herbs be? And you know what? All 5 of them would be this one. Let's talk about it. So I'm Dr. Patrick Jones from the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine, and I'm serious. This is probably the most important herb that I've ever used, and this is cayenne pepper. And why do I say that? I mean, I have in my herbal quiver of tools, I have hundreds of herbs that I can use, right? But I can tell you that cayenne pepper, Capsicum annuum, has saved more lives more dramatically in my hands and my experience than all of those other herbs combined. So I'm a veterinarian, been a veterinarian for over 30 years. And so I'm not just giving dogs shots and spaying cats. I'm the emergency room for all those critters, right? And we're talking about animals that have been hit by cars. We're talking about animals that have gunshot wounds. We're talking about animals that are bleeding out, that are in shock, that are this close to dead, right? And cayenne pepper, for all those kinds of scenarios, is the first thing that I reach for. Cayenne pepper is a premier crisis herb. It really is extraordinarily effective at bringing that animal back. You know, you can have a dog whose, you know, gums are white, his eyes are rolling back in his head. He's talking to the big dog at the end of the tunnel about his life, you know, and you squirt a little cayenne pepper in their mouth and they're back right now. I mean, their gums are pink, their eyes are bright. They want to know what the heck happened. Because a little cayenne pepper in your mouth is a big experience. And so for shock cases, it's extraordinary. I've used it on animals that are having anesthetic reactions. You know, they're not waking up or they're crashing under anesthesia. Little cayenne pepper, boom, they're back. I've used it on C-section puppies that don't want to breathe. You know, very common when you're doing a C-section, that little puppy comes out and he's never breathed before, number one. And number two, he's still full of anesthetic from what I gave mom to knock her out. And he ain't going to breathe. And a little cayenne pepper on those little tongues, man, and those little guys are awake and want to know what the heck's going on. And would I mind terribly putting them back where it was nice, right? But anyway, for shock, it's astounding. It also has good applications for bleeding. It can be used internally for bleeding at the same time you're using it for shock, right? Most of those cases are bleeding cases anyway. But you can also use it topically for bleeding. I've never once given a lecture where I mentioned cayenne, where some member of the audience didn't come up and tell me a story about how they'd whacked their finger open with a kitchen knife and put cayenne pepper on it and stopped the bleeding instantly. Interestingly, they also always report that it stopped the pain from that cut. Well, how's it doing that? Well, cayenne also has some powerful benefits for pain management. It's pretty zingy when you put it on that cut, it's not a deal breaker, but you're knowing something's happening. But within not long at all, that zing is gone and the pain from the cut is gone. Because what's happening is that cayenne pepper is interfering with nerve transmission of pain. And it does that in several ways. One way is that it binds with a receptor. It's a vilanoid receptor. It's called VR1, or I think they also call it TRPV1 or something. Anyway, it binds with that receptor and makes it so that it can't transmit the pain response to the brain. It also interferes with substance P, which is the neurotransmitter that modulates pain transmission to the brain. And so it really is shutting down and desensitizing those nerves and saying, look, guys, we're not going to talk about this. There's nothing to see here, right? It also has anti-inflammatory properties. So all three of those things are great. As if that weren't enough, it improves circulation, which flushes out prostaglandins and all the other chemicals that cause pain and inflammation. They're getting moved along and excreted through the kidneys and the liver. And so that decreases pain. You can use it topically as a lotion for arthritis cases, not only because of the chemistry with the neurotransmitters and the nerve desensitization, it helps with that to cause arthritis pain to feel better, but it also, because of the increased circulation, it's what they call a rubefacient. Rubefacient is the funky herbalist word for an herb that improves circulation. It reddens it, right? Rube, red, facere, to make. So we're making it red, It's increasing circulation to those joints, which, like I said, flushes out all the chemical mediators that are causing the inflammation in the first place. So really a great herb for pain, but it does so many other things. I mean, it's a phenomenal expectorant. It's great for clearing your sinuses. I've used it on sore throats. It kills the bugs and stops the pain. I've used it on hypertension, high blood pressure cases. Can have some real benefits there. We just finished and are uploading a fantastic, mind-boggling lesson on blood pressure and hypertension in the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine. My wife wrote it, who's a naturopath. I read that and I thought, wow, I should retire and let her do it. Because it's really, really amazing. And cayenne's part of that. It's also good for stomach ulcers. I mean, it's good for so many other things. We're not even going to get into it. We're not going to do a 2-hour YouTube video for you on cayenne because you'll fall asleep. It really is an astounding herb, particularly for emergency life-saving situations. One of my favorite plants, cayenne pepper, Capsicum annuum. If you'd like to learn more about medicinal plants, if you'd like to really get in deep with somebody that doesn't just teach you how to make a bedtime tea or how to make a nice lotion for your dermatitis, but somebody that can teach you what to do about a gunshot wound, what to do about a shock case, what to do about really in the trenches herbal medicine that might be really handy someday, come have a look at the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine. We'd love to join you. I'm Dr. Patrick Jones. Click the little like button if you like it. Click the little subscribe button. If you see any other buttons you like, you can click those too. Have a great day. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Dr. Patrick Jones from the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine. And I want to talk a little bit about inflammation today. And inflammation's really a pain, right? I mean, especially as we start advancing in years and leave our 30s, horror of horrors, we start noticing things, and inflammation can come from injuries, but it can just come from having a good time too, so what do you do about it? Well, I mean, you can take pills, right? I mean, there's aspirin and there's ibuprofen and there's acetaminophen and there's all kinds of things. And if that's not enough, you can get prescription pain medications, and they work. All those things work. And if that's all that works, then that's what you do. But there are some significant side effects. And man, if you ever want a really scary experience, turn out all the lights in your house and get a flashlight on some dark, stormy night and read the warnings on some of those medications. They have some pretty significant problems for some people. So what if I told you that there were some simple, natural, inexpensive, easy ways to go from this to this, right? That's better. And there really are some things we can do. First thing we can do is we can eat better. Now, you probably heard the saying, you are what you eat, right? Yikes, right? I mean, these days, that's a pretty alarming idea. I mean, you don't really want to be this guy, right? And so, basically, one of the first things we can do to decrease inflammation is quit eating garbage. Quit eating food that's not food. The modern diet is chock full of stuff that we just were not designed to eat. And specifically, let's look at some of them. I mean, refined carbohydrates are a big culprit in inflammation. And by refined carbohydrates, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about sugar, obviously, that's bad. But I'm also talking about white flour, bread, potatoes, pasta, pizza dough, breakfast cereals. All of those things are really high in refined carbohydrates. And what does that mean? Well, that means they're made out of sugar. Because honestly, your body can't tell the difference between a baked potato and cotton candy. All right, they all get broken down into the same simple sugars. And well, what's the problem with that? Don't cells run on sugars? Well, yeah, they do. But when we have them at such high levels, such unnaturally high levels, we shift the dynamic of our bodies. And what happens is that insulin levels raise dramatically to get rid of all that sugar. Because insulin is the hormone that unlocks the cell membranes, basically, to poke the sugar into the cells. Okay, that's his job. And so if you eat a lot of simple sugars, and that can be a baked potato, white bread, pizza dough, breakfast cereal. When we eat a lot of simple sugars, the insulin goes up. And the bad news is that insulin is really, really inflammatory. Okay? And so, you'll notice during the holidays that we went through here not too many months ago, if you eat a lot of sweets and a lot of sugars, you can hardly get out of bed the next morning if you're over 40, because of the inflammation. At least that's how I am. If I eat a lot of sugars, my inflammation levels go way up. The other thing is soda pop, and that's, this is also simple sugars, but I gave it its own spot on the list because it's a liquid, right? And it's really, really a very common source of high levels of simple sugars. And not just soda pop. I mean, a lot of the fruit juices, if it's straight fruit juice, then it might be okay. And it might be better depending on which berry and which juice it is. It might be not too bad, especially if it's a berry. Berries have a lower glycemic index than apples or things like that that you make juice out of. But if you're ever looking at juice, have you ever picked up a bottle of, like, say, cranberry juice, and it says on there cranberry juice cocktail? Well, if it just says cranberry juice, you're okay. That's not terrible. But if it says cranberry juice cocktail, what it ought to say is sugar water mixed with red food coloring and the slightest hint of delicious cranberries. It's mostly sugar. So, that's another source of high sugars, meaning high insulin, meaning high inflammation. Red meat. Yeah, red meat can cause inflammation too, especially if you cook it at high temperatures. If you cook it at high temperatures, it can create what are called advanced glycation end products. And boy, I hate it when that happens, right? But advanced glycation end products can be really precursors and exacerbators of inflammation. Okay, they can make it a lot worse. It also contains a lot of arachidonic acid, which can also increase inflammation. It's got other omega-6 fatty acids that are also precursors to inflammation. And so, red meat itself can be, if you eat too much of it, can cause more inflammation and make the inflammation you have worse. Now, if you want to really have trouble, eat processed red meats, okay? So not all meats are created equal, and processed red meats, stuff that's cured or, corned or smoked or dried or canned, those kinds of red meats are vastly more likely to cause increased inflammation than regular red meat. So if you're going to eat red meat, eat it medium rare, cook it on a lower heat, and don't, smoke it or can it or, if you smoke it yourself, it's probably all right. But, buying chemically created and processed red meats can be a very significant contributor to inflammation. Trans fats are a big deal too. And a trans fat is a liquid fat that they've glued hydrogen molecules to, so they've hydrogenated it, right? They've hydrogenated it, and that creates, from the liquid, a solid fat that they can use for cooking and frying stuff. They use it a lot, these trans fats. They use them a lot in fried foods, so you go to the fast food joint and you get onion rings or fish or, French fries or things like that are fried, deep fried. They're going to have a lot of hydrogenated trans fats in them. And they just increase inflammation too. They put it in margarine a lot. Okay. If you're going to eat fats in your diet, so my rule of thumb for fats and oils is don't eat oils from things that you can't squeeze and get oil out of them, right? I mean, you can squeeze an olive and get oil. You can squeeze an avocado and get oil. You can squeeze a fish and get oil. You can't squeeze corn and get oil, right? You can't squeeze canola and get oil. And so a lot of the oils that are being used a lot in the modern food industry aren't naturally occurring oils, and they've got all kinds of chemical processes in them that make them much less safe and much less healthy and much less good for us. Okay, so stick with the real oils from uncomplicated sources that don't require any chemical intervention or engineers to make them. So what should you eat? Well, there's a lot of good things we can eat, right? We can eat vegetables and fruits. Dark leafy greens especially are great. Nuts, the good oils, like I mentioned, the olive oil, avocado oil, stuff like that. Fruit's good, especially berries. Berries tend to have much lower glycemic indices than other fruits. And what do I mean by that? Well, the glycemic index is how much sugar is in it and what kind of sugar, all right? And so things with really high glycemic index, like a white potato, it might as well be sugar, right? Might as well be table sugar. But berries, like blueberries and blackberries and guys like that, they have sugars in them, but they're different kinds of sugars. There's more fructose, and the body breaks them into things that are less contributory to insulin release and high sugar content and all the inflammatory things that go with it. Okay. Fermented foods are great, and we'll talk about that some more in a minute. Legumes are great, and fish, especially fatty fish, are really good. And so, okay, what if you don't like fish? Well, if you don't like fish, take fish oil. And what if you don't like fish oil? I can tell people that don't like fish oil, usually it's people that have tasted it, right? Not great. But good news, you can buy fish oil that tastes good, right? This is the Barleans, and they make some omega-3. Some of them are vegan, some of them have fish oil, but they have oils in them that have omega-3 fatty acids and other omega acids that are in their proper balance and really great for you. And they taste fantastic. And I don't get anything from these guys for telling you this. I think you should all write them a letter and say, Mr. Barleen, give Doc Jones a nickel every time someone buys a jug of your stuff because he said so. And I wouldn't have to work anymore because I tell everybody to take this. Tastes really good, and it's a really great source of omega-3 acids and other fatty acids in the right balance, and that's really important. And that in and of itself decreases inflammation. Okay. It's also, as an herbalist, I'll tell you another secret. These Barleen omega products are a great way to get tinctures into people. If you got a little kid and you need to give them a tincture, you can put it in a little juice, and that usually works. But some of them really taste bad. And if you put it in this omega-3 stuff, this Barleen's fruity omega stuff, you can get about any tincture into a little kid. So just a tip from an herbalist. You can also take probiotics and prebiotics. All right. So what does that even mean? So probiotics are bugs, right? Bacteria. Our gut contains millions and millions of beneficial microorganisms, most of which are bacteria. And there's a lot of them. I mean, they outnumber our cells. Estimates are about 10 to 1. So for every one of our body cells, there's 10 of those little guys helping us out. All right. And they do all kinds of things. They, help with digestion. They produce hormones and neurotransmitters and things like serotonin, which is the chemical that makes your brain think everything's going to be okay today, and is a part of all kinds of neurotransmitter and muscle and nerve interactions. And we could get into that for 2 hours, but we're not going to. They have an impact on immunity, significant impact on immunity, and they have a significant impact on inflammation, on decreasing it and modulating it and managing it. Okay, so that's great to have all those little bugs in there, but sometimes bad things happen to them, right? Sometimes pharmaceuticals, especially antibiotics, can beat the heck out of them, and all of a sudden you have imbalances and disproportionate numbers of the wrong guys, and it's a real disaster because our bodies were created and designed to operate in a synergistic way with these microorganisms. And if you got the wrong bugs in there, or you don't have any bugs in there, or not enough bugs of the right bugs, well, now everything's out of balance and you got trouble, okay? And so you can take probiotics. And a probiotic is a capsule full of, lyophilized, dried little bacteria that are still alive. And, those are great. You can also take fermented foods, sauerkraut and kimchi and kombucha and all those guys that are, fermented live foods and beverages. There's yogurts like that. There's kimchi, and there's, apple cider vinegar that still has the mother, that's still a living thing. And those contain gut bugs that are good for you too. Okay. I mean, heck, if you pull a carrot out of the dirt and don't scrub it too bad and just wipe the dirt off and eat it, that's a great source of a lot of those bacteria that are good for you. Okay. And so there's ways to get them into our bodies. So that's great. So probiotics are great. But what's a prebiotic? So a prebiotic is food for the probiotics. Okay. Well, it's food for the bacteria, for those microflora. And there are lots of herbs that are great prebiotics. All right. So what do they want? Well, there's all kinds of nutrients and vitamins and things that they need, like we need. But they also, what they really love is long insoluble fibers. We can't even digest them. Mammals have no enzymes at all to digest insoluble fibers, and plants are full of them. If you look at a cow has no enzymes whatsoever to digest the stuff that grass is made out of, cellulose. So how do cows make a living eating grass? Well, it's because they have a 30-gallon vat called the rumen, one of their 4 stomachs, that's just a big fermentation vat full of billions of bacteria that love to eat grass, right? And they've got the enzymes to break up that cellulose, and they break it up into little, molecules that mammals can break down and digest and use, okay? And so we're not, humans aren't using them for that very much, for pre-digesting cellulose nearly as much as some of the herbivores are, but we are a little bit. But they're also doing all those other things for us. They're making hormones. They're helping with digestion of other things. They're helping with immunity. They're helping with all kinds of great stuff. And so we take probiotics and we take fermented foods and we add, billions and billions of these little guys to our gut. And maybe we should buy them some lunch, right? I mean, if we're going to invite them to the party, maybe we better have some food there for them. And so if you're going to take probiotics and you're going to take fermented foods and feel really great about doing it, then you ought to take some prebiotics with it, okay? And so herbs like burdock root, elecampane root, garlic, flaxseed, dandelion root, they all have a lot of nutrients, especially that insoluble fiber. There's one called inulin that is just the favorite food of those gut bacteria that all these plants have a lot of in their roots and in their structures. In fact, elecampane, the genus for elecampane is inula. That's where the word inulin came from. That's where they discovered it and described it. It was this great fiber that's in this root, this tough root. So prebiotics are really great too. So if you have good gut flora and you take care of your good gut flora, those little guys also will have a marked effect on helping to decrease inflammation. So
And if you don't want to grow your own or yank your own out, I know where you can get some. This is a prebiotic formula that we have over at HomeGrownHerbalist.net. It's got all those kinds of herbs in it. Okay, you can go to that and have a look. There's also some herbs that can decrease inflammation. Okay, and this is just a collection of herbs that I use for inflammation cases, and it works very, very well. And let's go through some of these guys. All right, let's go through and talk about each one. So Boswellia is the herbalist name for frankincense. Essential oil guys call it frankincense. We call it Boswellia mostly. And I'm talking about the herb, the actual tree sap, which is what it is. It's a tree sap from the Middle East. Grows on the Arabian Peninsula in northern Africa. And it has really tremendous anti-inflammatory properties. And especially if you combine it with turmeric. Those two together have a very synergistic 1 + 1 = 3 kind of anti-inflammatory effect. All right. And so Boswellia and turmeric root are great sources. Black cohosh has some anti-inflammatory properties as well. But black cohosh is also a muscle relaxant. So if you're having inflammation in your back or in your muscles, black cohosh, in addition to helping with the inflammation, it relaxes those muscles, right? Sometimes you tweak your back and you get this horrible spasm, and the spasm is worse than the tweak. And why does your body do that? Well, it's trying to protect you, right? It's saying, oh, he tweaked his back. Don't ever let him move again, right? Because it really hurt last time, right? And so it makes a splint, and everybody says, don't move. It hurts, right? And so sometimes that cramping and that muscle spasming is worse than the original insult. And black cohosh, in addition to helping with the original insult, which might have been an inflammatory thing, also helps with the muscle relaxation. But burdock is another one. This is burrs. This is like the burr under your saddle burr, okay? It's the root that's the medicine. And you want to collect that root. It's a biennial plant. So it has a 2-year life cycle. So you want to collect it either in the fall of the first year or spring of the second year. You want to collect it before it shoots up to flower, seed, and die the second year. So spring of the second year is great. That's when they're biggest. That's when I harvest them. Burdock also has some anti-inflammatory properties. And we can get into all the phytochemistry. And, if you want to do that, join the Homegrown Herbalist School, and we'll get really deep into some of this stuff. I have a lecture on burdock. In fact, it's on YouTube somewhere. Go to my channel. Go to Homegrown Herbalist and search for burdock. There's like a 2-hour video just on burdock. Okay? And that's almost as much as we talk about it in the school. Okay? Anyway, we can do that with any one of these plants. But burdock, it has some anti-inflammatory properties, a few. But it's also a kidney tonic and a liver tonic. And so in addition to directly decreasing inflammation a little bit, it's also, helping the kidneys get toxins and junk out of the blood, helping the liver to get toxins and junk out of the blood. And, if those toxins are going out in the urine or going out in the bile into the gut to be excreted, then they're not precipitating into your joints and causing inflammation, right? Devil's claw, this is actually an African plant, but it works so well. A lot of these anti-inflammatory plants are from fun exotic places. Boswellia is from the Middle East and turmeric's from India. Devil's claw is from Africa. And there's plants on every continent that can do all these things. These are just some really great ones I like. Devil's claw is another great anti-inflammatory. Ginger is a good anti-inflammatory, and ginger also is warming. It improves circulation. It's what they call a rubefacient. So in addition to directly doing a few things with interfering with cytokines and other inflammatory mediators, it also improves circulation. It just gets your blood flowing. Well, what does that do? Well, as your blood's flowing better, right? And burdock, this is part of burdock's action too, cleaning things up, getting things moving better. As blood is moving better, you're going to have more oxygen, and you're going to have more flushing away of prostaglandins and cytokines and all kinds of other guys that are causing inflammation, right? They're not going to be hanging around making that tissue angrier and angrier. They're going to get flushed away by better blood flow, okay? And so that's one of, ginger does it in a couple of ways. Yucca, also great. Yucca is a plant that's found in the desert southwest of the United States. Really a pokey rascal. The root's the medicine on that one. And it has some chemicals in it that address inflammation in different ways than these other guys. It's much more similar to a corticosteroid like prednisone or dexamethasone. It's not either of those things, okay? But its effect is similar. Without the side effects, incidentally, which is nice. And so it also is anti-inflammatory. Now, if you want to make all of these guys work better, especially the turmeric, which adores black pepper, add some black pepper. So when you're taking these herbs, if you take some fresh ground black pepper, and it's got to be fresh ground or tinctured, but if it's black pepper from your pepper shaker that was ground up 6 months ago, it's probably not very good, not very strong. Fresh ground is way better. The shelf life of fresh ground black pepper isn't very good, unless you're tincturing it, that's okay. I just did I don't know if that's up yet. There's a black pepper video either on YouTube or coming soon, okay? I did it the other day, but I don't know if it's uploaded. Anyway, that's a whole other topic too. But black pepper also has some anti-inflammatory properties of its own, has some capsaicin in it and some other things that can help with inflammation. But it also improves absorption and bioavailability and utility of these other herbs. So it just makes them work better, all right? And again, all those herbs happen to be in this formula if you want to grab it. If you want the easy button, just do that. But anyway, there are some great things you can do, and we could get into this much, much deeper, and we do that in the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine. We talk a lot about everything, I'm trying to remember, just on pain, I think there's 3 or 4 lessons that are probably a couple hours each, just on pain. Okay, so if you want to understand things on a very deep level, if you want to know what's been working for me as a veterinarian practicing for 30 years and as a traditional naturopath practicing on people, with people, have a look at the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine. If you liked the video, give us a click on that little like button and the subscribe button, and there's share buttons. There's a lot of buttons. Click buttons. That's fun. I'm Dr. Patrick Jones from the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.
You got pain? Let me introduce you to some rascals that can help. So hi, I'm Dr. Patrick Jones from the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine. And we're going to be talking about pain today and some herbs that I use all the time that really can have a tremendous impact. So let's get started. So first of all, here's a great quote from C.S. Lewis. It says, "Pain insists on being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It's his megaphone to rouse a deaf world." And that's really true. I mean, pain is really important. Pain's our friend because we live in kind of a dangerous world. There's fire and sharp things and ice cream trucks that can run us over. I mean, there's all kinds of bad stuff that can happen. And pain is the body's way of telling us that, you're in danger, right? Quit touching that. And so it really is an extraordinarily important mechanism. And, there are some conditions where people don't have pain. One is called SIPA, C-I-P-A, and another one is leprosy. And in both of those conditions, the nerves actually are dysfunctional for pain. People with SIPA have a lifespan of about 25 years because they can't perceive anything. They can't perceive heat or cut or pain or anything. And so, they die of hypothermia, standing on their porch. They die from infections. all kinds of things because they can't perceive the warning signs. Leprosy is the same thing. I mean, it's a different disease, but it has the same effect. People that have leprosy lose their fingers and things. It's not because leprosy makes your fingers fall off. It's because leprosy makes it so that you can't feel things, and you turn a key in your lock and you don't know when to stop. And the next thing you know, you've crushed tissue and damaged tissue, and you don't feel that. You don't know. And then it gets infected. You don't feel that, and you don't know. And by the time you realize there's a problem, it's too late to fix it, right? And so pain is actually a really good thing. But sometimes you can have too much of a good thing, right? Sometimes the body, having done us the favor of telling us that something bad is happening, it now, decides that it needs to tell us lots more about it, and then we just have more pain than we need. And so we want to do some things about that. So let's talk about some plants. And all of these plants are very easy to access in most parts of the world, in fact. And we're just going to go through one by one and kind of introduce you to some of these rascals. And like I said, these are things I use all the time. I'm a veterinarian, and I'm also a naturopath. And, I see animals that have a lot of pain issues. I talk to people that have a lot of pain issues. And these are some of my kind of go-to weeds to grab, when I want to help somebody. So let's have a look. The first one is Skullcap. And this is Scutularia lateriflora. It has a lot of other names. They call it hoodwort. They call it mad dog skullcap, or mad dogweed, or madweed. It's not the same as Chinese skullcap. That's a different plant. Same genus, but it's a different species. We're talking about the American one. And it grows in Europe, too. So the parts we use are the aerial parts. And Skullcap is in the mint family. But interestingly, most mints are very aromatic, and they smell nice and minty, or nice and something. Oregano's a mint too. It's not minty, but it smells like things, right? Most of the mints have a lot of essential oils, are very aromatic. Skullcap, one of the ways that I identify Skullcap is it has the structure of a mint, in that it has square stems, and the leaves come off opposite and alternate. So you can see in this old vintage picture, you got two leaves coming off east and west, and then you got two north and south, and then you got two east and west, and then you got two north and south. And that's the pattern for mint family plants. So if they have both of those, if they have the square stem and they have that alternating and opposite leaf structure, it's a mint, right? But most of them have a strong aromatic, aroma, and they taste like something. Skullcap doesn't taste like anything, and it doesn't smell like anything. So if it's a mint and it's not bragging about it, then it's Skullcap, okay? So how do it's easy to grow. It's a mint, and all of the mints are easy to grow. In fact, you need to be a little careful where you put your mints, because they'll take over your whole property. Very, very aggressive, happy, busy folks, and they spread by root runners and by seed, and so they're just, very, very sure you didn't mean to leave them in that bed, right? And so you need to sort of manage them. A lot of good ways to do that. You can put them in a bed of some kind. You can put them in a big pot. You can bury a kiddie pool and full of dirt, and plant them in that so the root runners can't get through the plastic. There's a lot of ways you can do it. The whole plant's the medicine. Anything above the ground's the medicine. That's what we always mean by aerial parts when we say aerial parts. And the best time to harvest Skullcap is when it's in bloom. So when the flowers come on, you cut off like the top third of the plant or so, and there you go. You got your Skullcap. So Skullcap, like all the mints, everybody in that Lamiaceae family has an affinity for the nervous system, or for nerves. They also tend to kill things. That's sort of the mint family mission statement, right? They got together and they said, we're the mint family, and we like to do something to your nerves, and we like to kill things. And so anyway, all their neighbors moved away when they hung that on their wall. But anyway, they kill all kinds of things. Some of them kill bacteria, some of them kill viruses, some of them are antifungal, some of them are anti-everything. Skullcap's antimicrobial properties are almost nothing. No, that's not what we use it for. And because, again, it doesn't have those essential oils. The essential oils are really the thing that are dangerous to the bugs. And Skullcap just doesn't have them, and so that's why it's not as good. But so on the spectrum of antimicrobial mints, it's way on this end of nothing, right? You got oregano and lavender on this end that kill everybody, right? But on the calming nerve spectrum in the mint family, Skullcap is the rock star. I mean, it is the most powerful one of all. And it's very useful for all kinds of issues that benefit from calming. So you can use it for insomnia. You can use it for anxiety and panic attacks, but you can also use it. They used to use it. The reason they call it Mad Dog Skullcap is because they used to use it for rabies, and I don't think it killed the virus or anything, but I think it calmed the crazy dog down, or the crazy person, unfortunately, in those days. And so, this is back in the 1700s, 1600s, they were using it for skullcap or for rabies. But anyway, it's very good for pain internally and topically, particularly if it's nerve pain. If it's like a pinched nerve or an aggravated nerve, skullcap is the bomb for that. And you can use it internally. You can make a tea, you can make a tincture, take it internally, and put it in capsules if you want. I usually use it as a tincture. And I often use it as a tincture topically. A lot of tinctures are very, very effective if you put them on topically on your skin. And so, if you have, a pinched nerve, or if you have joint pain, arthritis, it doesn't matter what kind of pain it is, and you put some skullcap on that topically, it often will numb those nerves and calm them down, tell them to have a nap and quit screaming at you, and that's how it fixes the pain. It does have a few volatile oils in it. So if you are going to make a tea, if you're going to heat it up, put a lid on it. That's true with any of the mints, especially the ones that smell pretty. You got to put a lid on it while you're making the tea. And when you make a tea, there's no reason to boil the herb long term. Boil some water, take it off the stove, throw the plants in there, put a lid on it. Don't boil the herbs. The hot water is plenty good enough, especially if you're using a dry powder. If you're using like tree bark and roots and stuff, then yeah, you got to boil the herbs. That's called decoction, right? But the way I do everything is I dry it and powder it and grind it. Just grind up the dried herbs in a blender, and then use the powder to make your teas. And then it just takes a minute for that water. As soon as it's cool enough to drink, it's ready. All right, so that's skullcap. Let's talk about hops. Humulus lupulus. They also call it Zarza. There's a couple of different species. Humulus lupulus is the one we use the most. It's the one most often used in the trade. But there's Humulus americanus and Humulus neomexicana. There's a couple of others that are also good. So hops is really easy to grow. It's a vine. And it really likes to have something to climb. What I do is I get a wire. If you're out west, you'll know what I'm talking about. You know what a cattle panel is? It's like a wire fence panel that you can buy at the feed store. I don't know if they have any of those in Manhattan, but we have them in Idaho. And anyway, feed stores I'm talking about. Anyway, it's just a wire panel, and they use it for fencing. And I just make an arch out of a couple of them, tie them together and make an arch. And then, plant the hops on either side, and it grows right over and makes this pretty little canopy, and it's real thick and nice. Or you can plant it next to a phone pole or next to a tree or next to whatever, something it can climb, a fence, right? It's a vine. And then it likes to have full sun or partial sun at least. It likes the soil to be a little neutral or acidic, although our soil is pretty alkaline here in Idaho where I live, and it grows happy fine. What it doesn't like is to have its feet wet for very long. So it needs pretty good draining soil. And if your soil's real, got a lot of clay in it and holds the water too well, you might want to amend that soil a little bit. So the medicine on hops is the strobile. And this is the strobile here. These little, they look sort of like little pine cones, but they're not. They're soft and green. And they start to form in the, early summer, late spring. But you don't want to harvest them until like really late summer, early fall, even maybe late September, kind of. What'll happen is they'll start changing from being green to having sort of a yellowish tint. They actually get a yellow powder on them. And that's when you want to harvest them. They also start smelling different. All summer long, they smell like green veggie stuff, And then in the late summer, early fall, they start smelling like hops. It's a more aromatic, richer kind of a smell. Don't harvest them the first year because, the plant's working too hard trying to make a good root system and stuff. But after that, harvest them every year. The easiest way to harvest them is to cut some of the vines off and then pull them off, let them dry even and then pull them off. Rather than trying to pull them off the living guy that's climbing up so high. So hops, as you probably know, has been used for making beer forever. They've been making beer out of it since like the 8th century. And it has some benefits in beer. One is that it's an antimicrobial. Hops kills bacteria, so it keeps the beer from spoiling until it turns into alcohol and is a preservative itself. So that's good. It also has some calming, sort of sedating effects of its own. So that's, worth having in some beer, I guess, if you like beer. It also has tons of estrogen in it. And I don't know if that's why they're putting it in the beer, but it does make for fewer broken pool cues in the bar, Don't tell the beer drinkers that. They'll be mad. They think it's manly to drink beer, but hops is chock full of phytoestrogens. And so, anyway, so hops is calming. Hops is, it's good for, you can use it for anxiety. You can use it for insomnia, all the calming stuff. Very similar to Skullcap, but it operates in a completely different way. The receptors it binds to are completely different. In fact, the receptors it binds to are the same receptors that marijuana binds to. And it doesn't have any of the THC, which is the chemical in marijuana that makes you high and makes it illegal. But it's in the same family. It's in the Cannabaceae family. So cannabis and hops are the only two genera in that family. And there aren't that many species in either genus. But so anyway, cannabis is over in this genus and humulus is the hops genus, but they have very similar properties. They're cousins. And so the hops has some of the calming sort of sedating properties, without having the intoxicating, get you high properties that marijuana has. But it does attach to those same cannabinoid receptors in your cells that are the guys that decide what hurts and what doesn't. They are very, very influential and important in managing pain. CBD oil has that too, So people that are using medical marijuana for pain or using CBD oil for pain could be using hops just as well. And I got to tell you, I discovered this completely by accident. I was using hops. I've used it for gut things. It's really good for calming guts. It's good for enteritis. Anything wrong with your guts, hops internally is fantastic. A little hops tea, a little hops tincture will fix a bellyache, fix diarrhea, fix enteritis and colitis and all those things. It just makes your guts feel better. And it has some good antimicrobial effects to kill pathogens without beating up the good guy bacteria. And so it's a really good herb for digestive issues. But I'm actually writing a book right now about trees, medicinal trees. And I've been trying to figure out what the heck to do with the vines, because vines aren't trees. And I have a book about weeds, and they're not weeds. And so, what am I going to do with the vines? So I'm not going to write a book about medicinal vines, although I probably could. There's a lot of them. But anyway, I decided finally, forget it. The vines climb the trees. We'll put them in the tree book, right? And so I was starting the chapter on hops in the tree book, and I was trying to remember how many M's are in humulus. Is there only one M or two M's? And so I Googled it, and there's only one M, in case you're need to know things like that. But anyway, as I was looking at the page that had the Latin name on there, it said it was in the Cannabaceae family, which I knew, but I hadn't thought about for years. And I thought, holy cow, hops is in the cannabis family. And immediately I thought, why the heck am I not using that for pain topically? You know? And I had that day this horrible pain in my thumb. We had moved the week before, and I'd ranked my thumb moving a couch or some dumb thing. And, you know, if I moved my thumb just right, I would get this horrible shooting pain all up my arm, just really sore. I'd been dealing with it for a couple of days, and, you know, I have a really good herbalist that I know, but I can never get a hold of him when I'm sick. It seems like he's always sick when I'm sick. Anyway, he's also easily distracted, and so I can never get his attention long enough to help me with what's going on with me. Anyway, I was, you know, just as I was grabbing something to jot something down, that pain shot screaming up my wrist. I thought, why am I not using hops for this? And I went into the herb room, to the shipping room, you know, where all the little bottles sit until they're going to go live at somebody else's house. And I grabbed a bottle of hops off the shelf, and I'm slopping it on my hand, you know. And my son-in-law, Davis, who's our facilities manager, and he comes over and says, you know, we got spray bottles for that. So I went to the other shelf and got a little spray bottle to put on the tincture bottle, because that's a really clever idea. And before I could get that lid on to the bottle, you know, because there's hops all over the floor, before I could get that lid on the bottle to make it a spray, the pain was gone. I mean, it wasn't 2 minutes, and it was just gone. And so right away, I roll up my pant legs. My knees had been killing me, and I'm spraying on my knees, you know, and then they don't hurt anymore, and I'm dancing around trying to make them hurt and wiggling my thumb and dancing around. Everybody's looking at me, oh, now what's Dad doing, you know? But anyway, that's how I discovered hops is good for pain topically, and it's amazing. It's really, really good. And since then, I've used it on all kinds of cases for pain. And it can, you know, it doesn't really matter what kind of pain it is. It seems also like Skullcap to be particularly good for nerve aggravations, but I've used it on arthritis cases, and inflammatory kind of pains and tension pains as well. And so really a great plant. And again, like I said, the strobiles, these little pine cone guys, are the medicine. That's what you want. And you want to harvest those late in the summer or early in the fall. And my daughter, Jenny, who's also helps us a lot with the school. She's a good little herbalist too. Anyway, she also was our customer support gal forever. But anyway, Jenny said you can use it as an alternative to yeast for making bread. So I haven't tried that. Somebody try that and tell me if that works. All right. Let's talk about cloves. Now, usually, I have a very strong emphasis on local plants, stuff you can grow, stuff you can go outside and find in the vacant lot next to your house. You know, I really, really think it's a very, very valuable thing to have a focus on locally available plants. And cloves are not locally available unless you live in Indonesia, right? Because they're a tropical plant. But they are locally available in almost everybody's kitchen. And so we're going to cheat. And we're going to say this is a sort of a locally available plant, right? But anyway, cloves, and the clove is what you use. These are the little dried up flower bud after the flower seed thingies. That's the technical botanical term. Anyway, they grind these up, and that's what's in your spice cabinet. In fact, you know, every single spice in your spice drawer is a phenomenal medicine. I wonder if it's on YouTube. Is it on YouTube? I've got a video called, in fact, I've got 2 videos called Kitchen Medicine. I don't know if they're on there or not. If they're not, I'll put them up. Anyway, and they just talk about all the spices. All the spices are good for stuff. And cloves is no exception. But like I say, it's only going to grow in your spice drawer, right? It's not, it's a tropical plant. So unless you have a greenhouse and can, you know, somehow, I don't know, duplicate the conditions of the tropics, you're not going to be growing much cloves. But it might be a really good idea to put a bottle of it in your medicine cabinet, right? So cloves is an anodyne. It's got good antibiotic properties. It's got antiviral, antifungal properties. It stimulates the immune system. It decreases inflammation. But mostly it's a anodyne. What the heck does that mean? What's an anodyne? Well, an anodyne is the funky herbalist word for a plant that eliminates pain topically on the mucous membranes. So the mucous membranes is your gums, your throat, your stomach, your bladder, anything inside your body, any surface inside your body is a mucous membrane. Okay. And so, if you put cloves on your sore joints, it won't work. I have never had it, have a big effect on that. But if let me take that back. It doesn't numb your joints. It does have some effect topically as a painkiller for the inflammation. But the anodyne properties don't seem as powerful through the skin as they do through the mucous membranes. Okay. So the thing I use it for most is on the gums for a bad tooth. That's what I use it for. And I got to tell you, my wife, so I married a sweet Idaho farm girl, dearest friend in the whole world. And she's also a professor in the school, in the HomeGrown Herbalist school. She's a midwife, and she's a naturopath. We went to naturopath school together. But she's also been a practicing midwife for years. And so she's an herbalist, and she's really great. But anyway, she went to the dentist and got some, this was years and years ago, and I don't even remember what he did to her tooth, but it was some kind of big deal he had to do this tooth. And, she was all loaded up with Novocaine. And she came home, and about an hour after we got home, the Novocaine wore off. And she was really, really in bad shape. I mean, she was so sore. And she's tough. She has a very high pain threshold. And for her to be that uncomfortable, I thought, wow, that must really, really hurt. So I called the dentist. He's a buddy of mine. I called him up. I says, hey, Lori's in big trouble here. The Novocaine wore off, and she's really in a lot of pain. And he says, oh, give her some Advil. And he said, give her half a bottle. I don't remember how much it was, but this was enormously high number of milligrams of Advil that he thought we ought to give her. And I thought, I think we won't do that. I think that if I did that, I'd have to give her something for her ulcer next week. So I went out to the herb room and I got some cloves tincture, and I got some little cotton balls, and I put a little bit of cloves on some cotton, and she poked it up next to that sore tooth, and boom, done. Numb. Right? Couldn't feel it at all. And she had to do that every half hour, every 40 minutes, to keep it behaving. But she got through that first day, and the second day she was okay. Right? And in addition to killing it, numbing the nerves, killing the pain, it has anti-inflammatory properties. It has antimicrobial properties. There wasn't nothing going to grow in that mouth and infect that tooth either. So that's good too. So a couple of things. The cloves are better if you don't grind them up. Okay, so whole cloves will retain their medicinal properties much, much longer and be much stronger than powdered cloves. You can powder them to use them. If you're going to make the tincture, powder them. But if you're going to store them for a little while, don't powder them. So I would grind them immediately when you're going to use them. If you're going to use the essential oil of cloves, make sure you dilute it. I'm not talking about using essential oils in this lecture. Okay, I'm talking about using tinctures and the plants themselves and teas. If you're going to actually use the essential oil, make sure you dilute it with a carrier oil, because it's really strong and it can over-irritate your tissues. But what I've always done is just use tinctures. That's what I do. And so, yeah, cloves are really great. Really great as an anodyne for topical pain, especially like dental pain. That's mostly what I use it for. Okay, here's the next one. This is Teasel. Dipsacus is the genus, and there's several different species, and we don't care which species we use. Whenever you see this is the Latin name, right? Dipsacus. Dipsacus is the genus. And then the species would be Phlorum or Sylvestris, or, there's a lot of different species. But if you ever see this SPP after a genus names, it just means species, right? Everybody, all the guys in that genus are fine. And so that's just a taxonomic shortcut saying this genus and all her kids. That's what we're after. So it has several names. They call it Fuller's Teasel or Carding Teasel. The Chinese name is Zhu Duan, if you're keeping notes on Chinese names for things. We'll talk about that in a minute, actually. But they call it Teasel, and they call it Fuller's Teasel or Carter's Teasel because they used to card wool with it. Or, Teasel is for teasing wool, for combing wool, okay? And they actually used to make, felt with it, and they used to card wool with it. They used to make big machines. I should have put a picture on here. I have a picture from an old museum in England of a big machine that was made out of teasel heads. They took these heads and made this giant brush for combing wool and carding wool. Anyway, it's a very cool plant. They use it a lot in, ornamental flower arrangement, fun things too. So, by the way, this weed down here is not teasel. The leaves here are not teasel. I don't know what that is. The heads is what we're looking at. Okay, so the root's the medicine. And teasel is an interesting plant. I got introduced to teasel in sort of an interesting way. I was driving down the road with a buddy of mine who's a plant scientist. He runs some greenhouses down locally here. Great guy. And we're driving along the road, and I saw teasel in the ditch bank growing. I had no idea what it was. I don't know that I'd ever noticed it before. I saw this plant. I had this extraordinarily strong impression. You need to get to know that plant. That's a really important plant. I'm like, holy cow, what's that about? And I asked Fred, what's that plant out there? He says, I don't know what it is. And so I thought, oh, that's really weird. And so about a week later, I saw it again. I was at the property of Stephen that worked with me at the time. And he's a pretty good herbalist, and he knows a lot about plants. And I had that same feeling, that intense impression. Holy cow, I have got to learn this plant. It's a really important plant. And I says, what is that? And he says, it's teasel. I says, well, what's it good for? He said, I don't know that it's good for anything. I says, no, it's really good for something. I dug up the roots that day, knowing nothing about it. Dug up the roots and started a tincture, right? And then I got out all my old dusty herb books and start digging. And sure enough, teasel's a medicinal plant. Nobody uses it anymore. They're using it. They're starting to use it a lot for Lyme's disease. It's very good for Lyme's disease. But, it's just sort of like, bell bottoms and love beats. Nobody's doing it right now. But they will soon. But anyway, the Chinese have been using it forever. And the Chinese name is Zhu Duan. And Zhu Duan means, and I my apologies to anybody that actually speaks Chinese, okay? I have disclaimer, I have no idea how to pronounce Chinese words. But Zhu Duan means restore that which is broken. And the Chinese used it on broken bones and wounds and stuff, which I've never done. But I'll tell you, there's something about that name that also relates, in my mind, to what it does with pain. Because teasel, so here's the story, right? I'm tincturing this stuff that I don't know what the heck it is. I'm reading my books and learning and studying for a couple of weeks while it's percolating, right? Macerating. And the day I was pressing the tincture, literally, the day I was pressing the tincture, this lady walks in. She says, Doc, I've got this weird nerve pain, right? I was in an accident years ago. I have all this nerve entrapment. And I have this horrible pain, and nothing helps. Do you have anything for weird nerve pain? And that was one of the main thing that my old dusty book said it was good for. It was weird nerve pain, right? And I says, wow, maybe I do, right? As I'm pressing the tincture, maybe I do. Bottled some up and gave it to her. She took it for about a week, and the pain was gone forever. This pain she'd had for 20 years probably just gone, done, right? And I've used it on, since then, a number of other cases that had chronic pain from something that happened forever ago, you know? And in a lot of those cases, it just makes the pain go away. It restores what was broken. You know, sometimes a nerve gets aggravated and irritated. It has some big trauma in its life. You know, you get hit by a car or something, and the nerve is so traumatized that it decides that its new job is to remind you all day, every day that you got hit by a car 20 years ago, because that was bad. Don't do that again, right? But nothing active is going on. There's no inflammation. There's no more, nothing's going on. It's just that that nerve is stuck on that idea, right? It's sort of like when your computer freezes up and it's stuck and it won't do anything else. And what do? Well, you turn it off and you turn it back on and reboot the computer. And I think, in my experience anyway, that's what Teasel does. It reboots the computer. It's just, look, what are you doing? Don't you remember your job? Your job isn't to scream about a car accident that happened 20 years ago all day, every day. Your job is to tell us what the weather's like out. Is it cold or is it hot? And, you know, what do the curtains feel like? And is that pan warm? And, you know, I mean, you have all kinds of important jobs. Forget about the car wreck. It's not happening today, right? And in a lot of those chronic, unrelenting pain cases, the Teasel just knocks it right out and it never comes back. And, you know, most people take it for, you know, a week for that to happen. It's not like you take one dose and it is over. But for a lot of those chronic cases, it really helps. Now, it also helps active pain things. You know, if you wrench your back and it hurts because it hurts, it's because it's inflamed and spasming and mad and everything, Teasel helps that too. But you'll have to do it again in 4 hours because you have an active process going on, right? But anyway, so it's good for both. And I mostly use it topically for those kinds of incidents, and it works really good for the active stuff. But for the long-term and chronic stuff, I do both. I do topical and internal. And it oftentimes is very effective. I'll tell you, it's also, I've only ever treated one serious Lyme's case in my life because I don't live somewhere where there's any Lyme's. This gal went to Wisconsin and got it. But I met her the same week that I met the other lady when I'm pressing this Teasel tincture, right? And she had serious advanced Lyme's disease. She was having neurologic stuff and having seizures all day. And anyway, I put her on Teasel, and I put her on a number of other things too. But I put her on Teasel, and she got markedly better, stopped having the seizures. In fact, I talked to her about 2 weeks after we started the protocol, and I says, how you doing? And she says, well, I don't have seizures anymore. And she was having 8 or 10 seizures a day. Like, she didn't go anywhere unless her mom was on her arm. She was in her 20s. She didn't go anywhere without somebody holding on to her because she might have a seizure and bust her head, you know? And so, anyway, she says, I never have seizures except late at night. I'll have one sometimes, like it in the middle of the night. I thought, wow, that's great. I just take some Teasel right before you go to bed because apparently it's not lasting, 12 hours. And she started doing that and then didn't have seizures hardly at all anymore. But anyway, this was years ago and she's markedly better. It's not perfect. It doesn't, it didn't completely eradicate all the devastating effects of having had Lyme's disease for many, many years. But she's way better than she was, The other thing that I've used Teasel for, and it's another pain thing, sort of, is MS. And again, the same week that I got that Teasel pressed, I had the lady with the bad back, the Lyme's case, and then within a week or two of that tincture being ready, I was down at a conference in Utah, and this sweet young gal comes up and says, do you have anything for MS? And I started to say, no, I don't really, I have never dealt with an MS case, and, I'm a veterinarian. We don't even see MS in the dog community. And, I started explaining to her why I wasn't of any use at all. And in the back of my head, I hear loud as loud, nerve pain. Like, oh, maybe I do. And I says, take this and see what happens. And she says, how do I do it? And I was just about to tell her what I'd been telling everybody. Oh, I don't know, do a teaspoon a couple of times a day, half a teaspoon a couple of times a day, right? But with her, I started to say that, and I got this wet blanket. And I said, I don't know. I said, you know? And then all of a sudden, I said, this is what I want you to do. I want you to take 1 drop 3 times a day of the tincture. And the next day, I want you to do 2 drops 3 times a day. And then 3 drops 3 times a day. And if you get to 30 or 40 drops three times a day, call me. We don't want you taking too much. But I want you to go up incrementally like that. No idea why I said that. I'd never said anything like that to anybody. Never heard of anything like that. Right? But anyway, about 2 weeks later, she sends me an email. She says, Doc, you have got to send me a picture of this plant. She says, when I hit 14 drops 3 times a day, it's like somebody flipped a switch. And I feel pretty good. And I used to 2 or 3 days a week be so bad my husband had to carry me to the shower. And I feel pretty good. And like a year later, I was actually telling this story. I was up in the hills on a plant walk with a bunch of people, right? Tromping around in the mountains. And this little gal in the front row raised her hand and says, it was me, right? So here's this sweet gal who had MS tromping around in the hills with us, feeling pretty good. She was off almost all of her meds. She was off all the pain meds, you know, and she was doing pretty good on the Teasel. And since then, I've used Teasel on 4 other MS cases. I don't see a lot of MS cases, okay? But I've had 4 other cases, 2 of whom were, you know, one was the mother of a son-in-law, and the other, in fact, they were both mothers of son-in-law, 2 of them, 2 different sons-in-law. Anyway, those 2 and then 2 other people, all of them had pretty significant MS, you know, and every single one of those people has said, wow, the Teasel really, really helps. And every one of their doctors has said, I don't know what the heck you're doing, but you're way better off than you ought to be at this point. I mean, I don't know why you're still walking around and feeling good and able to do anything at this point, you know? And so Teasel is doing something in MS cases to decrease the damage to the nerves or something. I don't know what it's doing. Somebody needs to do a study on it and see what the heck it's doing. But I can tell you, and 5 people is not a statistically significant sample. I know that, right? I mean, you know, that's nothing. But I'll tell you what, when the 6th guy comes along, he's getting some Teasel too. Because it's worked amazingly well for everybody I've done it with. Okay? So anyway, Teasel, so how do you use it? Well, first of all, it's a biennial plant. All right? It's a biennial plant. The root's the medicine. And so you want to harvest the roots either at the end of the first year or better yet, in the spring of the second year before they bolt up to flower, seed, and die. So a biennial plant is a plant that has a 2-year cycle. So the first year, it just does this low leafy thing. The second year, it bolts up, flower, seeds, and dies. Okay? And so the roots, the medicine, and so you want the roots when they're as big as possible, but you also want them before the thing bolts up to flower, because once it does that, it's pulling everything out of the roots, because it's never going to need those again, right? So the time to harvest that is either late fall of the first year or in the spring of the second year before it shoots up to flower. And the way you find it is, you know, you look for these guys. These are the old dead grandmas. You don't want their roots, right? They're not even alive anymore. But if you look at their feet, you'll see these guys, the first year plants. They've got these wrinkly leaves, and on the back of the leaf, there's, you know, the big major vein on the back of the leaf has little spines all along it too. Okay. So there's a tradition in herbalism called the law of signatures. And the law of signatures says that plants have clues on them, right? That God put all kinds of little hints on the plants, right? So yellow things are good for your liver because bile is yellow. Red things are good for circulation. You know, mullein flowers look like, mullein leaves look like lungs, you know, all these things. And look at this plant. What is she saying? Look at the anatomy, the morphology of that plant. What's it saying? It's saying, I hurt everywhere, right? So, anyway, it's good for pain. All right. So, like I say, you can use it internally. You can use it topically. Really a great plant. And incidentally, going back to that first MS case, I read months later in a book, an old dusty herb text, that some people can have a reaction to Teasel. They can have a reaction where they get a rash, right? And it's not a big deal, but it's no fun. And so this author said, what I do is I have people start very, very small doses, like 1 drop 3 times a day, and then 2 drops 3 times a day. Literally, this is what he said. I'm not kidding. 4 drops 3 times a day, 5 drops 3 times a day. And if they do that, they don't get the rash. So, take home message. It's very, very important to listen to that inner voice. If you're driving down the road and the spirit says, you really need to learn about that plant. Gee, maybe you ought to. If you're talking to somebody and that inner voice says, start slow with this one. Just do 1 drop 3 times a day to start. Maybe I'll listen. All right. So let's talk about our next friend. This is Cramp Bark, Viburnum opulus, the snowball bush, right? In Great Britain, they call it a Gelder rose. I like saying that. That's fun. I don't know what it means. Gelder rose, that's fun. Swamp elder, water elder. They call it European cranberry because it makes berries. But this is a very, very common plant. This is not hydrangea. Okay, if you're living on the East Coast and you're seeing this, you're thinking, oh, I bet that's a hydrangea. I've got one of those in my yard. No, you don't have one of those in your yard. This is Cramp Bark, Viburnum opulus. Completely different critter. From a distance, it kind of looks hydrangea, but if you get up close, it's a completely different looking thing. But they usually call it a snowball bush. So, all right, let's talk about it. Cramp bark is, it's a shrub, and here's the berries I was talking about. And these berries they're edible, but only in the very strictest sense. Edible in the sense that you can put them in your mouth and swallow them and they won't hurt you. But they don't taste good, all right? So don't do it. Okay, anyway, it's a very popular ornamental. It likes sun, it likes light shade, doesn't care. Likes the dirt to be kind of alkaline, which is a good reason to live in the western states. It's easy to propagate. You can just cut little sticks off and stick them in some dirt in a bag, and it'll root pretty good. But the inner bark's the medicine. And whenever you read in an herb book that the bark's the medicine, they're almost without exception talking about the inner bark, the cambium, right? Now this plant, the bark is so thin, I don't bother pulling the outer bark off the inner bark. Just take all of it. But you want to make sure you're getting that green, thick underlayer. That's the part that matters, okay? The outer bark on this is really thin and brown and scrubby, and it doesn't matter. There's not enough of it there to affect your medicine, but there's enough of it there to affect what you're going to do all day, so don't bother. Try to separate it. And you want to harvest the bark in the spring before the plant flowers, okay? And but these are big, shrubby, bushy guys. They get a little out of control. You got to trim them anyway. So in the spring, you go out and you cut a bunch of canes, and you haul them into the house and cut the bark off and pull it off, let it dry for several weeks, probably about 3 weeks to get it really dry. And then that's your cramp bark for the year, right? Make a tincture, make a tea, do whatever you want with it. So, and this is one that was grown in my yard. They've been using this forever. Native Americans have been using this for as long as Native Americans have been in North America. And the American colonists used it too. I guess they were British colonists, technically, until they became Americans. But anyway, it's an antispasmodic, okay? And so what does that mean? Well, it means it resolves muscle spasms, right? Turns off muscle spasms. And so a lot of pain happens because of muscle contracture. Like if you pop a nerve in your back, you know, I've got this rib that pops out once in a while. And the rib popping out isn't a big deal. But what happens immediately after is all the muscles in my back cramp up and spasm because that really hurt and we don't want him to ever move again. Your body's making a splint to hold you still because something bad happened, right? And the splint hurts worse than the injury. The muscle cramps hurt worse than the injury. And so, you know, using an anti-cramping herb, an anti-spasmodic herb like cramp bark or lobelia, you know, there's a lot of them. But anyway, relaxes those muscles so they can unwind. So it's an anti-spasmodic. It has some very, very, very mild sedative properties, not enough that you'll even hardly notice. But it's a little calming, and I think that's more to do with muscle relaxation than with neurologic sedation. You know, Skullcap will knock you out, and it'll help you get to sleep at night. Cramp bark just relaxes everything. You know, it's more of a anatomical and physiological than psychological. Okay. But, you know, it's antispasmodic. It's hypotensive, which means it is good for lowering blood pressure. And why is that? Well, it's the same thing. It's a one-trick pony, right? It's just relaxing tissue. Okay. So if you relax tissue, guess what? Your blood pressure drops, right? Because everything's relaxed. Your blood vessels are surrounded by muscle. The arteries are anyway. And so if you relax everything, well, then the pressure's going to go down. Okay. It's also very good for improving circulation. It's a vasodilator, right? Same thing. It's just relaxing it. It's also, I use it in kidney stone formulas. Well, what does that got to do? Well, guess what? The pipes that the stones have to go through to get out are surrounded by muscles. The ureters between the kidney and the bladder and the urethra between the bladder and the outside world, they're muscular tubes. And so if you can relax those, oh, isn't that nice? Now the rock can get through easier. Okay. Because those muscles, their job is to squeeze things and push them through. And if it won't go through, what do? All they know how to do is squeeze things. So they squeeze harder. Right? And so if you relax them, that stone can move better. And certainly I give other herbs too for that. I mean, I give them, you know, herbs to make them increase urination. I give them herbs to dissolve the rock. That's handy. But the muscle relaxant's a good idea too. So, you know, back pain, neck pain, muscle spasms, uterine cramps. This is, interestingly, one of the few plants that's good for uterine cramps that's also safe to give during pregnancy. Most plants that impact uterine contraction do it hormonally, you know. And so there's a lot of plants that are good for menstrual cramps because they, you know, they do things to estrogen levels and progesterone levels, and it relaxes. It tells everybody to, you know, enough is enough, and things relax. Cramp bark, like I said, it just relaxes muscles. Nothing to do with hormones. And so, you know, you don't want to use an herb that relaxes the uterus through hormonal management during pregnancy, because you don't want to monkey with the hormones if somebody's living in there, right? That could be a bad idea. But you can use cramp bark during pregnancy. You can use it for preterm labor, you know. And so that's also a benefit. You can use it internally or topically. And I'll tell you, you know, let me give you an example of cramp bark. So I had brain surgery about a year ago. Okay, I was growing this fun, big old Vienna sausage in my head just for fun. And it wasn't cancer or anything, but it was squishing my optic nerve. And in fact, that's why I went in to see what the heck was going on, because I was starting to have some visual disturbances in my left eye. And they couldn't find anything wrong with my eye, and so they did an MRI. And they said, oh, it's because you got this big sausage growing in your brain, squishing your optic nerve. And they took it out. But, so I was in the hospital for a couple of weeks. I was in the brain surgery ICU for about a week, and then they moved into the regular some other place for about a week. Anyway, because they like to watch you after they puddle around in your brain for 9 hours. Anyway, when I left the hospital, I had very little pain from the surgery, almost nothing. I think I took some Tylenol the first day, but they wouldn't let me take anything stronger than that because they wanted to make sure my brain worked. They came in every half hour and asked me my name and if I knew what day it was. And I never did know what day it was. So they knew I was fine because I never knew what day it was before I had surgery. But anyway, 2 weeks later, I'm going home and I could hardly walk. I was in so much pain from two things. Number one, I would guess I was on a hospital bed for 9 hours in who knows what kind of position. And then I was in these other awful hospital beds for 2 weeks, and my sacrum was just completely ranked and mad, right? And so my wife got me home, and she's a naturopath, right? And she tossed me on the massage table, and what did she do? She took some cramp bark and some skullcap and some valerian and some chamomile. I have a formula called Rest Easy that's got skullcap, valerian, and chamomile. She used that, and then she used a formula called No Spasms, which is cramp bark and lobelia and some other guys, antispasmodics. So she used nervine painkillers to tell the nerves, quit screaming because you're getting pinched. And she used muscle relaxants like cramp bark and lobelia to tell the muscles, all right, guys, relax, right? And I immediately felt some relief. And she was spraying those on topically, alcohol tinctures of the herb sprayed on topically, right, on my sacrum. She let it sit for a minute. It started feeling a little better just from the nervines and the antispasmodics. And by the way, she gave me both of those internally as well. So I was getting them internally and topically. And then she, because everything was relaxed, was able to very easily relocate that sacrum using a modality called naprapathy, which we practice, which is, anyway, that's a whole other lecture, naprapathy school. Anyway, naprapathy is sort of a child of chiropractic. It was developed by one of the disciples of D.D. Palmer, who invented chiropractic. But naprapathy, instead of using abrupt concussive movements to pop things into place, it uses, it does ligament work. It readjusts things by manipulating and working and fatiguing the ligaments, not by popping the bones around. Anyway, naprapathy is cool. Anyway, so she got mine, and she also used vibration. We had a Resx tuner, and she used that to relax the muscles and get some nerves to quit screaming. Anyway, 20 minutes later, I was completely resolved. I mean, I was walking around like nothing happened. So, these herbs and these other modalities too, but certainly the herbs, the antispasmodics and nervines, were phenomenally beneficial in that case. And like I said, you can use cramp bark topically as a tincture, or you can use it internally. Works both ways. Okay, Willow. Let's talk about Willow. And Willow is a big group. I mean, there's a lot of willows. Salix is the genus. And I don't care which one it is. Use whichever one you want. And the bark is the medicine. And again, it's the inner bark, but don't even bother with the inner bark. The willow tree has this thick, hard, tough, brown tree bark all over it. And you're not going to get into the inner bark without some pretty serious work. And so what you do is you just use the green bendy bark on the young branches, right? And the outer bark on the green bendy bark is so thin, again, like cramp bark, don't bother taking it off. Just take all of it. Take all the bark off the thing. Take everything that'll come off of that stick, and that's the bark you want. But it's the inner cambium, the thick layer is what you want. The outer green layer is so thin you can hardly see it, so don't worry about that. So here's some big old weeping willow trees. The green bark's what you want. These trees are easy to grow. You can cut a willow branch off and stick it in a bucket of water and it'll root in a couple of weeks. They're super easy to grow from cuttings. You can use the bark whenever you want. It's a little better in the spring, a little more potent in the spring, but you can use it whenever you want. And it's basically aspirin on a stick. It has a lot of salicylic acid in it, salicylates, which is what aspirin's made of. Aspirin was made from plants. They invented aspirin from the spirea plant, which is almost identical to willow medicinally. And the word aspirin is a spirea, out of spirea. I mean, that's where it came from. A lot of our pharmaceuticals have had their origins in medicinal plants. So use it like aspirin. You know, it's good for pain. It's good for fevers. It's good for inflammation, right? It's good for arthritis, any kind of pain, really. You can use it internally as a tea or as a tincture. That's how I've always used it. I've never used it topically, and I don't know why, but I just never have. I've heard that you can use it topically. I've also heard that a few people get kind of irritated if they use it topically, you know. But I guess I need to try it as a tincture topically. I like tinctures topically better than anything else. And the reason I like that is because the alcohol in the tincture helps them be more penetrating, I think, you know. And so, plus it's clean, you know, you spray it on and in a minute it evaporates. And the alcohol goes away, the herbs are still there, and they've gone in and done their thing. But I got to tell you, I think every plant we've talked about today can be used topically as a tincture. And that is a technique that is vastly underused in herbal medicine. Vastly underused. And I've been doing a ton of it the last several years and just loving it. I mean, topical tinctures, particularly for pain and muscle relaxation, are astoundingly good. You know, and if you've got somebody that's got a lot of pain and they're on pharmaceuticals, well, you know, mixing drugs and herbs is a pretty bad idea a lot of the time, right? Because they can have sometimes they interfere with each other. Sometimes they don't interfere with each other, and it's great and no big deal. Sometimes they augment each other, you know, and that could either be a very good thing or a very bad thing. If you're taking an herb, I mean, a pharmaceutical to lower your blood pressure, and you add an herb to lower your blood pressure, well, now what? Now you got really low blood pressure. Or if you're taking a pharmaceutical to lower blood sugar and you take an herb to lower blood sugar, well, now you're hypoglycemic, you know. And so you can combine herbs and drugs in many cases, but you dang well better know what you're doing. You know, you probably ought to be talking to somebody that understands both of them. And so the nice thing about topical tinctures is you don't have that problem. They don't affect and interact with the drugs on anywhere near the same level as they do if you take them internally. And so if you have somebody that has a lot of pain and they're on half a dozen pharmaceuticals because they have cancer or who knows what, use the tinctures topically. You know, give them some Skullcap, give them some hops topically, spray it on, you know, put the tincture on topically. And then you don't have to worry about all the inner conflicts between the pharmaceuticals and the herbs. Really, really an important principle. And herbalists need to be doing more of that and thinking more and talking more about it. Okay. Here's another one. This is white sage, Salvia apiana. And this is a cousin. Salvia is in the mint family. And it's a cousin of the sage that you stuff your turkey with, right? Grows in California, Southern California, the Baja Peninsula, Mexican West Coast, places like that. So it's kind of a sissy when it comes to temperature. I don't think it would grow in Indiana, you know. But it's way better for pain than its cousin, Salvia officinalis, which is, you know, garden sage, the spice, which is an amazing herb. I mean, I'm not going to beat up on regular sage because it's an outstanding herb for a lot of the same things this is good for, but it's not as good for pain. This is a rock star for pain. Okay. And I was introduced to this herb by a friend of mine, Jeff Mitzel, who's a good herbalist. And Jeff does a lot of stuff with pain. Really helps a lot of people. Anyway, I was having some pain in my back. I was having a back thing. And he went to his car and said, "Here, try this on it." And it was white sage tincture. And actually it was white sage and sagebrush, Artemisia tridentata, together. And they're both called sage, but they have no relationship at all. Sagebrush is Artemisia, it's a different genus. White sage is Salvia. But they both smell like sage, so they both got called sage. But anyway, white sage is a really good medicine for a lot of things. The aerial parts of the medicine, just like all the mints. It's a mint, right? It likes full sun, it likes well-draining soil, and it likes warm temperatures. If it freezes, you probably won't overwinter, okay? It's best to harvest it when it flowers. Harvest it before the flowers open up. Harvest it. And then you just cut off the top third or a quarter of the plant, let it dry for a couple of weeks, and you're all set, okay? So what's it good for? Well, it's good for about everything. It's like its cousin, Salvia officinalis, regular sage, turkey stuffing sage. They're antibacterial, they're anti-inflammatory, they're good for fevers, they're antifungal, they're great astringents. The sages are phenomenal for diarrhea, dysentery, but they're also good because they're astringents for sore throats, for gingivitis, for gum disease, for inflammations in your throat and your guts. Really, really great. Really good for gut stuff. And whether that's diarrhea because of the astringency, it's good, but it's also good because it's a mint, and all the mints like to do something to your nerves, right? And this one loves to do something to your nerves. And so it calms the gut too. It calms inflammations and nerve pain in the gut too. So that's good for GI stuff. And it has some anti-inflammatory properties, which is great. And it also binds with the cannabinoid receptors, which are the same ones that hops bound with, right? And that marijuana binds with. It doesn't make you high. Don't bother trying to do that. But it does make you not hurt the same way marijuana does. And marijuana is phenomenal for making things not hurt. And so, as CBD oil is pretty good. But I don't think CBD oil is better than this or hops, personally. Anyway, we're not going to get into that. CBD oil in Idaho is illegal. Federally, it's legal. Marijuana is legal medically in a lot of states, but federally, it's illegal. So I don't use anything that's illegal, and I don't care who thinks it's illegal. Okay. But the good news is you don't have to, because you can use hops or any of the other guys we've talked about today, but you could use hops and white sage and get exactly the same effect for the pain stuff. So you don't even have to use legalized anything or illegal anything. All right. So anyway, really, really good internally or topically for pain. All right. And I'm trying to think if I've ever used it internally. I think I've always used it topically. This one. I've used the other sage internally for all the other things it does. I only ever use this for pain. And I've only used it topically as a tincture, just spray it on, and it works amazingly well. But you can use it internally just like its cousin. They're both salvias. They do the same thing. This one does have a little more thujone in it than regular salvia. And thujone is not something you want to take long-term internally. You can spray it on yourself all you want. It never hurts you. Okay. But internally, long-term thujone's probably a bad idea. So I wouldn't take this, like if I had pain, this isn't the herb that I would choose to deal with it chronically for the rest of my life internally. It is one I would probably use topically for the rest of my life. Right. But anyway, just be aware of that. All right. And again, it's the aerial parts of the plant, leaf and stem, anything above the ground. When it starts to flower, harvest the top third. Okay. This is another great quote. This is from Helen Keller. She says, although the world is full of suffering, it's also full of the overcoming of it. And isn't that the truth? I mean, you look at these plants, and we've only talked about 7. We're having a live workshop. The HomeGrown Herbalist School is having a live workshop here in Idaho sometime in June. Go to homegrownherbalist.net, click on events. You can see when we're doing the live stuff. But anyway, we're doing that workshop, and we'll be talking about dozens and dozens of herbs for pain and how they work and how to use them and which is best for this and that and the other thing. You know, we're not even scratching the surface here on this thing. You know, we just talked about 7, and we just sort of ice skated over 7. You know, if you want to really, really dig into some things, that event will be remarkable. Or join the HomeGrown Herbalist School, you know, then where we do some ice fishing and not just ice skating. We get into way more depth and way more detail, and way more cases and way more, you know, because like I said, I'm a veterinarian and a naturopath. We do this stuff all day, every day. And so we have a lot of case studies and a lot of things. But anyway, we would encourage you to swing by homegrownherbalist.net. We also have there, just coincidentally, a pain kit with a lot of these herbs are in it that are good for things. So you might have a look at that. Just go to homegrownherbalist.net. We have a lot of blog articles there you might enjoy, and a lot of other resources. So, and certainly you can learn about the school. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. If you didn't, share it with your friends. We sure appreciate that. Click that like button. Click that subscribe button. If you have a question, put it in the comments. I answer about everything. Sometimes it takes me a couple of weeks to remember that I need to do that, but put it on there. We'll get to it. Anyway, this is Dr. Patrick Jones from the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine, and thanks for watching. So this is Dr. Patrick Jones from the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine, and we're excited today. We're having a live webinar with a dear friend of mine.
I can hear you.
Good. And a brilliant fellow.
Yes, I get a bit of an echo.
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. So Sherrick is a physical therapist down in Cache Valley. And he's also got a master's degree in counseling psychology. So he understands how brains work. And he has developed a remarkable tool. And the tool is called the Resx Tuner. And I'm an herbalist, right? And I'm a naturopath, and I'm a veterinarian and a lot of other things. I don't know. Anyway, amateur belly dancer, a lot of things. Anyway, I sell herbs, right? And I like herbs, and I use herbs. And I don't sell a lot of other stuff. But I met Sherrick, and I got introduced to this device, and I was astounded at the utility of it and the efficacy and the development and the theory. And anyway, so we started using them a lot in our naturopath practice, my wife and I. And anyway, we just wanted to talk to Sherrick a little bit and let him tell the story and tell us a little bit about this and answer all your questions. So, Sherrick, tell us a little about yourself and how this came about and other fun things.
Sorry, there's a bit of a delay here on my end.
Yep.
Are you ready for me? Hi, everybody. This is Sherrick Peck, and hopefully I don't talk over anybody, but I can't seem to listen to you guys on that end without getting a lot of echo, and I'd rather not do that. So I'm going to try lip reading tonight, and I hope I can do a good job of that. But type in questions if you have them into the chat, and then if I need to, I'll bring up my speakers in a few minutes, and we'll try and listen a little bit. Very anxious to speak to you today. I have loved a wonderful association since I've gotten to know Dr. Patrick Jones several years ago. It was a terribly windy, blowy, rainy day the day we met. And we were both happy to be inside and have a roof over our heads. But it was a wonderful opportunity to visit. I remember looking across the room and seeing you and thinking, oh my goodness, there's something about this guy that is very powerful, and I felt a close connection immediately. So we've had a good friendship ever since. And I've come on several herb walks, and I've come on several occasions to learn all that I can. I don't retain everything that I need to very well up in here, and that's probably a part of my own experiences that I've had some brain injuries and some things in the past. Dr. Jones is finally working at my level. Have a little bit of brain surgery to get him to slow down just a little bit. But I'm very happy to be here today. I am the developer of the Resx Pain Tuner Pro, this little cool device. It's really an energy management device. It's designed to help us have a talk with the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve is the most important system in the body to try and help us heal. Its job is to help you sleep at night and help your heart to keep beating and help your breathing to keep happening. In fact, the vagus nerve would be very happy if all you did was sleep, eat, breathe, create beautiful little babies. And its job is to keep everything moving through the system. One of the posts recently that we had, let's get on phone call so you two can hear each other. That'd be wonderful. I'll do that. Let me put my phone back in. That'd help. Just let me know what number to call, or hang on just a second, because that will help an awful lot. Can I call Evan's number? Let's see.
Call sure on your phone so you two can hear.
It's over there. He's in the contacts list.
Sorry, everybody. Technical difficulties.
What's the phone doing?
Does this phone work for us to be able to talk and communicate through, Evan?
I can hear you okay. There's a little bit of a delay, probably.
All right. So, for starters, while we get a couple of these technical glitches out of the way, sorry for the misspelling of vagus nerve on there. Autocorrect always misspells vagus nerve. It thinks it ought to be in Las Vegas. And I spent 6 years of my life in Las Vegas, but that's the wrong kind of vagus nerve. But
well, it's sort of similar though. You're there to have a good time and relax, which is the principal purpose of the vagus nerve.
That is very, very true. That's very true. It's hard to do that in Las Vegas, especially if you've ever lived there.
Yeah.
So would it be all right if we, now that I can hear you, would you like to ask any questions at all as we get started, or would you like me to play a little video clip that I prepared for you?
Go ahead and do that. And all of the questions will be typed.
Oh,
we're the only two that will be verbal. Yeah.
Oh,
so,
perfect.
folks, if you have any questions at all, type them on the chat box, and we'll answer them and see if we can get to everybody.
That sounds great. Evan, if it's all right, would you pull up our little video clip?
Ever wonder what's going on inside your head during a migraine? Captain, trigeminal nerve is flaring up again. I think another blood vessel's about to blow. Oh, I don't think she can take much more of this, Captain. Have we tried going to her happy place?
Let's put a happy little cloud. Just a happy little cloud.
No offense, sir. Load headache medicine. Fire at will. Stomach reporting major damage, sir. We can't take any more damage down here, Captain. We just can't. Caffeine, sir? Make it so. Feet not strong enough. Acupuncture and daith piercings. No effect, Captain. Cold water. Isn't it hot water for migraines? We're making it worse. Prepare for toxic overload.
Oxycodone is not for everyone. Call your doctor if you have thoughts of suicide, rupture of the spleen, unpleasant discharge, coronavirus, coma, or death.
Wait, Captain, what's that? What is that thing? She got a Pain Tuner Pro. Pain Tuner Pro? She must have signed up for that 60-day risk-free trial. 60-day risk-free trial? Yes. I saw her researching it online. This thing sounds like a miracle. Muscles at the back of the neck are starting to relax. It's working. Vagus nerve calming down. Trigeminal nerve returning to normal, Captain. I've never seen anything like this. How is this happening? The Pain Tuner Pro uses a series of vibrational patterns combined with bilateral resonance therapy to relax muscles, stimulate blood flow, and calm nerves down naturally without expensive, addictive, damaging, and sometimes illegal drugs. Isn't this just the latest fad? No way. The Pain Tuner Pro's been developed over the past 10 years. It's been used by over 20,000 people. My data suggests it'll soothe your headache within minutes, or you can send it back with a 60-day risk-free trial. Blood flow returning, and I'm feeling relaxed. This thing's got 4.9 out of 5 stars on their reviews, with raving fans going nuts about how it's changed their lives, helped them get off medications, and live life pain-free. And with a 60-day risk-free trial, they'll beam one to your home and let you try it for 2 whole months. She's smiling. We're smiling. We're all smiling. Thank you, Pain Tuner Pro. So, what are you waiting for? You can feel the incredible transformation for yourself. Use it for 60 days, risk-free, with a guarantee it'll calm your headaches within minutes. Or simply send it back. Click below right now and get yours today. With this risk-free 60-day trial, there's nothing to lose but the pain. Come on, click now. Listen to what that little voice inside your head is telling you.
Well, there you go.
We have to sometimes poke fun at the way that we try and approach everything, don't we?
Yeah, well, I've never done anything like that. I'm a pretty sober guy.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, this tuner, you know, there's a lot of apparatuses out there, that make a lot of claims. And a lot of it's just nonsense, and a lot of it might be true, but there's no data or research. But the Resx Tuner Pro has research. I mean, scientists with lots of letters at the end of their names and white lab coats and everything have done research and published papers showing that this device is actually very effective for doing some of the things it says it does. So that's remarkable. That's a pretty significant accomplishment for an alternative medicine device. So tell us a little about that, Sherrick.
Sure. We actually had some research published in the journal Oral Health, conducted down at Brigham Young University. That's a school here in Utah. And what they, the way that they did this study was kind of fun. Well, there are 3 components of the study, I guess. You see, the folks up there in Canada where this journal is published sent a note to me one day, and they said, how does your device work? We're starting to see and hear reports that this thing works. How does it work? And I went to BYU, who had just conducted a study on it, and said, can you write this thing up, because they'd like to describe it in their journal. And they actually did a full publication. It was quite fascinating. But in this research, we took a group of stressed out college females, and apparently that's not too hard to find on the Brigham Young campus down there. So they took all these stressed out college females, and they took our device and they put it on 3 points, just simply 3 points. These 3 points were the back of the neck, the suboccipital muscles, and they ran it for 1 minute. And then they took it and put it on the right in between the eyebrows, right at a point where the trigeminal nerve comes out there. It's called the supraorbital branch of the trigeminal nerve. They put it there for 1 minute, getting both sides of the brain. And then they stuck the device inside the mouth, out against these muscles that chew really hard. And they put it there for 1 minute on each place. And they found that even these super stressed out college females had a 50% reduction in tightness in these muscles right in here, which are great indicators of whether a person's going to have a migraine headache. It appears that stress and migraine headaches and all kinds of other conditions, they go hand in hand. And so what happens in that study, and of course they did a control group where they just placed the device on them for 3 minutes. And guess what? Those people, those girls had absolutely no change in the tension in their jaw muscles. And when we compared that to several other studies that came out of Japan and other places, we found that our tuner technology, the resonance that we created, is unparalleled for calming the central nervous system. Now, they also wanted to understand why. And so I wrote this really nice little article about why and how it happens. And the way it happens is the trigeminal nerve is an absolute opposite of the vagus nerve in the central nervous system. The vagus nerve wants to take you to Vegas, wants you to become happy and healthy and sleep and recover. And the trigeminal nerve, all it wants to do is make sure you're getting food into the system, but it's also a big part of the fight or flight stress response in the human. Anytime you're afraid that something's going to hit you, your jaw clamps down and your neck muscles clamp down, and it's part of that whole stress response. So what they showed there was it's unparalleled to calm down the central nervous system. What they didn't show there was how exactly it does that. And we're still not exactly sure. We just know that it does. It does calm down the central nervous system on almost everybody that little device touches.
Yeah. And I think that's really important to understand that the nervous system and the endocrine system, both, and they're buddies, they have that parasympathetic side, which is healing, resting, digesting, reproducing, all the nice things in your life. And then they have the sympathetic side, which is adrenaline, fight or flight, stress. And in this 21st century world we live in, we have all kinds of stresses that aren't really based on reality. In the good old days, the lion would chase us, and if he didn't catch us, we'd feel better, right? And nowadays we got traffic and deadlines and bosses and school board meetings and all these stressful things, and the body can't tell the difference between all that stuff and the lion. And so, and we don't have the release of stopping running and breathing deeply and relaxing, so the body never gets told that the stress is gone. And so we get into this chronic hyperadrenal sympathetic fight or flight mode, and the vagus just gets stamped out. You can't do both. It's one or the other. So the vibration is remarkable for resetting that system, and turning off the sympathetic and turning on the parasympathetic. And I've had the same experience using tuning forks for acupuncture. You talked about the day we met at that big conference, and I had exactly the same experience. I looked across this big vendor hall, and I saw this guy, and I felt like I'd known him forever, And we got together and did some talking, and it was amazing, the connections and the things we were both working on and thinking about. And it's just, this tuner was really cool. And I'm going to tell you a story at that conference. So he's talked about one of the powerful effects of these vibrational therapies is decreasing stress, and, not just emotional stress, but, physical pain causing stress. But the other thing that it does is it can sort of reboot the nervous system. So I had a gal come up to me, a lady that I'd known for years, right? She came up to my herb booth at that same meeting, and she had a dead arm. And I hadn't seen her for months. I wasn't aware that this was going on. But she had this, for a long time, this terrible pain in her arm. And then one morning she woke up and she couldn't feel it at all. She had no motor control and she couldn't feel it. And, she wanted to know if I had an herb for that, And I thought, oh, that's, I don't know if I do, but let's talk to this other guy. He looked really smart. I've known him for minutes. Anyway, I took her over there and we talked about it. We talked about the nervous system and how sometimes a nerve gets stuck, and it decides that its job is to hurt all the time. I had this horrible accident and I don't want anybody to forget about it. Even though no more damage is happening and it happened a long time ago, they keep sending that message, And so eventually with this lady, what happened was her brain said, enough already, forget the arm. We don't need it, right? It just hurts all the time and we're tired of it. So it turned it off. And so it's sort of like the computer freezing up on a screen and you got to turn it off and turn it back on to get it to reboot, And so Sherrick listened to her story and he says, well, yeah, let's try it. And he got that tuner out and started working on her. And he did it for 20 minutes, maybe. How long was it, Sherrick? It wasn't very long. And by the time he was done with that first session, she had 75% function in that arm. It was incredible. And so she bought one, took it home, and he gave her a little protocol to do every day. And I followed up with her, and within a couple of weeks, she had 100% recovery, no more pain. The nerve had forgotten all about the terrible accident 10 years ago or whatever it was. And she had full function of the arm. And, this was years and years ago, and she still has full function of the arm, And I saw another case at another conference. They brought a lady up that had just had a seizure. And that was in Provo, wasn't it? And he did some work with her. And she said, wow, I feel way better. I mean, usually after a seizure, I would have to go home and sleep for the rest of the day and feel lousy. She says, I'm going to enjoy the rest of the conference, And so it's really remarkable, and I've seen several other cases like that where you just get this miraculous, holy cow, reboot of the nervous system. And then, of course, there's all the regular stuff, the headaches and jaw pain and neck pain and back pain and all the other stuff. But there's also some remarkable emotional and stress relief things you can do, because it's all tied together. Our brain and our endocrine system and our emotions. You think about it. When you get really frightened, what happens? Your heart starts beating faster, right? You feel sick to the stomach, right? All these things happen to your body because of your emotional things. And some of that can be long-term trouble, and so this tuner can also be useful for, reprogramming some of that stuff. So tell us a little about that, Sherrick.
Well, and I think you and I have had this conversation several times, but we ought to share it a little bit more. You have you have done a great job of sharing about all kinds of amazing herbs and plants, medicinal plants that can help people. But when we're in that state of stress or trauma mode, as we might call it, our body has a hard time absorbing all of the best nutrients. Because when the body goes into that stress state and adrenaline is flowing, so is cortisol. It's its buddy.
Yep.
And cortisol's very first job in the whole stress response is to paralyze the digestive system. It does that because it does not want you to be digesting your last meal and trying to outrun the lion.
Exactly.
Cortisol's job is to tell you, get rid of the contents of the stomach, get rid of everything out of the bowel, and let's just get on with trying to survive. But
you can run faster if you pee your pants.
Yeah. But that creates quite a problem, doesn't it, in healing, because your body can't absorb the good nutrients when it just had a toxic bomb go through the gut. And that's part of the difficulty with so much of us in that chronic stress state, is the system won't digest and it won't pull in the best nutrients that we need. And so one of the things that is really important for us in this process is to teach the nervous system how to get back into a calm state to where it can start having a proper flow in the intestinal system. It can start pulling out the nutrients that it needs, and balancing out that system is super important. So that's one of the primary first jobs that the tuner does. In fact, it doesn't even care about your chronic pain. It doesn't care at all about your headache. Its goal is to just get you into a balanced state where everything's working again. And it's just nice that a lot of the chronic pain just kind of backs off and goes away.
Yeah. And isn't that the truth? It's the same thing with herbs and nutrition and everything else we do. If you give the body what it needs, it'll fix itself. That's what acupuncture does. You get the chi moving around and the body will sort things out, and now you don't have a headache and you don't have a, indigestion or whatever it is. It's really important. And the tuner really does do that. And, it has some other advantages, and we have ways to cheat with that digestive system and the herbs, so you can use tinctures topically. They'll sort right into your blood. But a lot of the herbs that are calming and relaxing and stuff, they're also calming. So now you're tired and sleepy, and you can't do that while you're driving to work and stuff. Or at work. And so the tuner does the same thing without the chemistry. It's a vibrational thing. And so there are some advantages to that. And of course, you can combine them, and that's even better. You can do some muscle relaxant anti-spasmodic herbs, like our No More Spasms formula, or the Rest Easy Nervine calming with the valerian and chamomile and stuff. But the vibration itself, doesn't need any chemical buddies to do its job. It's really effective. And so if you can't take herbs, you can use this tool. And that's why I love it. Because sometimes I have clients that can't take herbs because they're on pharmaceuticals that don't like the herbs, or they're allergic to the one that I love, And so it's really great. We had a situation here a month ago. Sherrick saved me because I had an Iceman puddling around in my brain for about 9 hours, and I got a new part. Did you see that? They included that at no extra charge. Yeah, it was fun. So now I'm handsomer than ever. But anyway, I had brain surgery, and I was on a medication so that I wouldn't have a seizure after the brain surgery, because sometimes you do, and they don't like that. They don't like you to jangle your brain right after a surgery. And so they gave me this, even though I'd never had a seizure, they wanted me on this for a while. And because it's a pharmaceutical that shuts everything down and calms everything down,
it shut my guts down, right? And so nothing was moving, and I couldn't take, and I've got a million herbs that'll fix that, but I couldn't take them because they were, strictly contraindicated with that particular drug. And so I called Sherrick. Actually, my daughter called Sherrick and said, hey, what do we do with my dad? And he said, oh, take the tuner and put it on his belly button and run it through these couple of cycles. It took 5 minutes and I was completely resolved. I never had any more trouble. It rebooted the system. It counteracted the physical results of that pharmaceutical. And it was amazing. It just woke him up, and put me into a vagus dominant digestive mode, right? Which is a fancy medical way of saying makes you poop, right? So anyway, it was amazing.
Needed to do.
Yeah.
So
anyway,
so many people might question, what exactly did we do? And one of the questions that I get an awful lot, Dr. Jones, is, essentially this thing's a lot like an electric toothbrush, on steroids, of course, but it uses, much the same concept. It's a handheld device and it vibrates, right? What is it that we did that helped your stomach? Because an electric toothbrush would not have helped your digestive system.
Right.
So what I had you do was turn the device on. I had you push the red mode, which is a fancy algorithm. Algorithm's just another name for a pattern. It's a pattern. And I had her run that red mode or red pattern on your right at the belly button. Why did we choose the belly button? I figured that that's the last place that you had an attachment to your mom. So it must be kind of significant. It's also the last place that your vagus nerve had an entrance with, had its entrance into the world, I guess. So a lot of nutrients and things have gone through that system. So we put it at the belly button. We ran it on this red mode, which is actually an activation mode. Can't get that out of your electric toothbrush. But this activation mode essentially shook up everything in there, saying, wake up, hear me, listen to me. And as soon as that mode was finished, we had her put it on my green mode, which is another pattern that is simply designed to say, let's go for a quick walk and watch the waves come in from the ocean. And it's just a walk down the beach, watching that wave come in, wave after wave after wave. And the green mode is designed to get things back into harmonious balance. And that was all we did. That took about you're right, about 5 minutes.
Yeah. No, it was amazing. And I'll tell you something else is that the belly button is right on the conception vessel, which is one of the most important meridians in the acupuncture system. It's a governing vessel. And so, all kinds of important stuff happens based on how happy that meridian is. And so, how did it work? I don't know. Did it move the chi? Did it jangle the nerves? I don't know. I've got a brother. Yeah, we don't care. But I've used it on acupuncture points with remarkable results. It likes that. And they don't care if it's a needle or if it's vibration. It all works. I've got a brother who's a brain surgeon, brilliant guy. And he's a very, esoteric, prove it or jump in a lake kind of guy, which is how you become a brain surgeon. Otherwise, you end up being an herbalist. And anyway, he studied acupuncture. He went to school and learned acupuncture and started doing it. And so I had to kind of rib him a little bit, because I was always the alternative guy and, he's the science guy. I mean, I'm a science guy too, but he's serious about it. And anyway, I said, so Mark, how does that acupuncture work? Right? And he says, well, I don't know if it's chi or endorphins or little green goblins, but I can measure that it works. So it's the same thing with the tuner. We've seen the research, and they can measure that it works. And maybe someday some guy will come along and say, yeah, it's releasing endorphins, or it's moving chi, or it's, we don't know. But we can measure that it's working. And anecdotally, as a practitioner, man, I've seen it work. And it's been really remarkable. We've had great success with it, with a lot of stuff.
Tested on some animals.
Yep. And I'll tell you, one thing I did want to discuss with you, Sherrick, the tuner comes in this beautiful box, and they give you a great little book that tells you some basic principles, and they give you a strap so you can put it on your leg and weird things. And then the tuner's in here. And the only concern I have is that it has these little handles on the bag. And that has caused many tuners to leave my home in the hands of my adult children. And I never see them again. And, I bet we've bought 10 of these things. Because every kid that comes along and has a headache or a sore neck or whatever the heck, we say, well, try this tuner, and then we never see it again. So we don't. So you might want to, you probably did that on purpose as a marketing stunt.
We sell more tuners that way, but it's mostly to our clients who have lost them.
Yeah, there you go. In fact, I've had 2 emails this week of students of mine that bought one a week ago when I wrote that blog article, and their kid took it already. So anyway, if that's not a testimonial, I don't know what is.
It's pretty nice to have a machine that is so very helpful. And I know you've been over here to Logan. You've been here to my home. Yep. It's pretty neat that you've been within a few feet of the plant that makes these. Now, it's not a green plant. Well, it's a green plant. They use a lot of solar energy to run it, but
the harvesting's tricky.
But the company that makes these for us is right here in northern Utah, and it's so good to have their assistance. I was over at the factory today and going over some things with their engineering and manufacturing people, and they're just delightful to work with.
Well, that's great that you're making them stateside. You were started out over in China.
We were. We made them in China for way too long.
Working better. Yeah.
They looked really nice. They sounded really nice, but they broke way too much. So I brought them over here and said, "Hey, make this thing so it doesn't break so much." And they've done a good job.
And we've had several of the new ones. I don't know if you can see that. I want to show you something else that's on this new one that's cool. And that is the blades, the wings. So it can travel through space and cure those migraines on spaceships. But also, you can use this for myofascial pain and stuff. And you can actually do a sort of scraping thing. In China, they've been doing that for about 5,000 years. And they call it gua sha. And they use a seashell. But if they'd had one of these, they'd have liked it better. Yeah, their shoes wouldn't have gotten wet when they were finding it. And it vibrates, which makes it even better. But very cool. Tell us a little about that myofascial stuff.
I'll tell you, one of my favorite things about using those wings is, and I mean, this type of thing is used in professional offices all over the U.S. too. We call it instrument-assisted soft tissue mobilization. We can't use simple little two-syllable words like gua sha. But
or they wouldn't be able to charge you for physical therapy school.
Exactly. But these little wings, they are just an amazing thing, because when you turn on the vibration of our device, and scrape the area on the skin, all of a sudden the brain has a much better connection to that area.
Right.
And so we use it for conditions like peripheral neuropathy, where the brain has had a disconnect to a part of the body. And it could be 20 years of that peripheral neuropathy. Well, you take the device and turn it on high and start scraping at the toes or scraping at the fingers. And just like that woman that we worked with all those years ago in Idaho, we wake up the brain's connections to that area. But now we do it in 3 minutes instead of 20 minutes. That
right.
little scraping process is beautiful. So people that have peripheral neuropathy, restless leg syndrome, plantar fasciitis, these wings are a game changer for those chronic pain conditions.
Yep. Yep. It wakes the brain up and reminds it that it had a job to do down there.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is amazing.
You know, it's I try and explain it to people like this because everybody gets it if I explain it this way. If you've ever watched the movie Princess Bride, you know that an area is not completely dead. It's just mostly dead. And if that means it's, you know, it still has a chance that we can wake it back up. And that's all we do. We've done that. We've done that with individuals that have had spinal cord injuries. And they have been 8 or 9 or 10 months or 3 years without any ability to move a part of the leg. And we can start using that scraping process and waking up those nerve endings. We had a tremendous experience in Idaho Falls a few months ago at a therapy clinic my friend owns up there. She called me up and said, would you come and work with this individual that has a spinal cord injury? She has a little bit of function in her left leg, but the right leg is dead from the hip down. I said, well, sure, let's come and work with it. She has gotten absolutely no movement in the toes and the ankle, knee, hip for 9 months. And we started that process of scraping at every single toe, in between the toes, on the top of the foot, on the bottom of the foot. Immediately, within a minute, she started saying, I feel pain. And, pain is a great way to help the brain start sensing something again. We don't like pain, but if pain is temporary, it's acceptable. And
it's a great alarm clock to get the brain's attention.
It's exactly right. So her brain started sensing that area as we were scraping. Within 5 minutes, she started being able to wiggle her toes. And she could move her ankle just a little bit. Well, here we are, 5 months later, and she is now walking with just a knee brace. She doesn't have to have the whole leg in the thing. She's starting to walk using a walker, doing all kinds of things that wow. She never even thought she could be doing again at this point.
Yeah,
it's pretty neat. Those wings are amazing.
Yeah, wings are cool.
They were pure inspiration. They were a message from somebody much smarter than me that said, put little wings into the thing. People will think it's funny. They may call it a flying squirrel, but I'll tell you, it's going to help people. And I had one of those cool experiences that told me it needed to have those wings in our new device.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. It's a great device. It's a great upgrade. It was great before. My kids they stole a lot of those old ones too. But yeah, it's a great device. Really remarkable. And, you've done amazing things. It's just, I tell my students this all the time. You got to listen to the voice. You'll have inspiration and you'll have, ideas and things that, don't feel like they came from your brain, and you need to learn to follow that and listen to that. And you can have some pretty remarkable experiences. And I think this tuner is very much a product of that from the very beginning, because I've heard the early stories about how you woke up in the middle of the night telling your wife you need an electric toothbrush so you could tweak it. So yeah,
that was true. And she kind of woke up and said, "That's crazy," and went back to sleep.
Yeah, that's what my wife said when I started herb school. So yeah. Well, great. Well, why don't we, is there anything else you want to say? Otherwise we can get to some of these questions.
I don't see any questions, so you'll have to cue me what
right.
What people might be
I'll read
interested
them to
in.
you. Evan, where's my buttons? Oh, by the way, if you buy a tuner, you also get this cool Resx pillow, which is wonderful for, you put it right here when you're watching one of Doc Jones's YouTube videos, and if you fall asleep, you don't wake up with a crick in your neck, you know. So it's not just treatment, it's also about prevention of pain. So anyway, the pillow's great.
So you got to know, though, that those beautiful little cases that have those really nice little handles and that strap that puts it on your leg or arm and that cool little pillow, these are all made by my neighbor. And sometimes when she gets a little bit behind, I go over with my wife and we help stuff those pillows. So it's a community event, but we love the feedback we get from people all over the world that love those little tools.
So they're professionally stuffed pillows by a trained therapist.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like my compost is made by a professional. All right.
Yes.
Evan, show me how to make this screen go up. That's why we have Evan here. He's smart. He knows stuff. How do I make the scrolly thing happen? Oh, I'm pushing up, you up and down. Okay. All right. All right, so let's read these. So Cheryl says, the webinar is very timely for me, and thanks for scheduling it, Doc. And thank you, Sherrick, for creating such an effective tool. So there you go. You're welcome. Anita says, Anita Clayton, who practically raised me in New Jersey. She was one of the nice ladies at church that kept me out of trouble. She had a great kid, and he was a buddy of mine. Anyway, Anita says, Patrick, look forward to see you again. I tried one of these gadgets at a friend's house, and I liked it. Looking forward to learning how it works. Yeah, they're amazing. Bonnie says, I'm learning to use this wonderful tool. Thank you. The next nice lady's laughing about the vagus nerve with an E. All right. James says the audio is not good. Sorry about that. And some delay. Yeah, we're just figuring this out. We never did it with two people before. All right. Okay, so Mama White Tiger, speaking of the sympathetic fight or flight, right? She's would it work with helping to balance the autonomic nervous system as well? Would it help balance the system? Yeah, I think that's what we're talking about. Any thoughts on that, Sherrick?
No, it's absolutely its job. And it is she's right. It's a balancing act. And if you think of it as the fight or flight mode being in full high demand, the vagus and the parasympathetic system can't work. But if we get that parasympathetic system up, the fight or flight or the stress mode goes down. They cannot be on the same plane.
Right.
We have to, one is going to override the other. And so we need the vagus system and that parasympathetic system to override the other system for at least 8 to 10 hours a day, so we can get a good night's sleep and recover from all the rest of the stresses. But you don't
So
want to
stuff can
sleep all
heal.
day long too. So you don't want that system being the ruler. You want it to work in conjunction, and you want them to be friends. But
Yep.
research on people who've had car accidents and head injuries, concussions, whiplash, or been in the army, or been through trauma, those people have that system turned on, and sometimes it's been turned on high for years. They don't know how to get it turned back down. Those people especially benefit by having something that teaches their system to start behaving again, to get back into balance.
Yep. You got to reboot the electronics. Okay. Karen says, what conditions will this help? And we've talked about a lot of them, but headaches, migraines, TMJ, stress, anxiety, back pain, loss of feeling or function, peripheral neuropathy, gut troubles, stuff in your body. Anything we're missing?
The FDA doesn't allow us to make any claims.
Right.
But
that's right.
If you get the system into balance, everything improves. Everything. Yeah. And I can't think of a single condition that cannot benefit from this fine balancing of the central nervous system. Every condition that I've ever seen, including seizures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you can balance out the nervous system and you take away the effects of those diseases.
Yep. And I'll tell you, just an example of sort of the principle. We were doing acupuncture on a lady that had a bad hip. And she came in, and it was, probably her second or third visit. And we said, so how's your hip? And she said, oh, my hip's a lot better. It's not 100%, but it's a lot better. But I'm not incontinent anymore. And, I didn't know she was incontinent, but she'd been wearing a Depends for 20 years, because she had bladder incontinence. And by getting the chi running through her hip like it was supposed to, fixed her bladder, and I looked in my old dusty acupuncture books, and sure enough, some of the points I was working on for her hip, the old Chinese guys also used for bladder stuff, but it's the same principle. If you give the body what it needs and it sorts everything out, all the connections and interactions and relationships between the nervous system and the tissues and the endocrine system, the body fixes itself. And it fixes all kinds of other stuff that, didn't have anything to do with your sore hip. And so I found the tuner to have similar properties. They're really a great tool.
Thank you.
All right. Lou says, will it help other pain in the body? I have fibromyalgia and degenerative disc disorder.
So, the fibromyalgia, one of the first things that it helps with for that condition is helping normalize sleep patterns. We know that sleep is a serious problem for those who suffer from fibromyalgia. But we also know, if you look back in a person's history, they have some form of serious accident or illness that they've been through sometime in the past, or they've been through a traumatic experience. Those are the kinds of things that turn on that fight or flight mode for way too long, and then they develop into that chronic pain pattern. And one of the first things the tuner will do with some daily, consistent, gentle use is help normalize those sleep patterns. Will it make everybody sleep 9 hours? No, or I would sleep 9 hours. But it helps me get great sleep out of the time that I can be asleep, and great time out of the time that I can be awake, so that my brain will function all day. And that's its job, is to help regulate energy. We have individuals that have not just fibromyalgia, but conditions like chronic fatigue syndrome that use the tuner to help them regulate their energy. Or they may have multiple sclerosis, and they'll use it to help them balance out energy so that they are not always crashing. And if they're taking a lot of the medications, they're oftentimes up, but then they just crash down really hard. And our device helps them manage energy without having those big crashes.
Yep. Yeah, and I'll tell you, that fight or flight sympathetic system is a disaster for immune system. I mean, it does all kinds of horrible things. So yeah, getting all that balanced and happy is good. I'll tell you something else, Lou, that would be important to look at and helpful probably would be looking at the leaky gut protocol on homegrownherbalist.net, because a lot of times fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, a lot of those are autoimmune conditions. And we just did a webinar on that last week, but have a look at that. There's an article, go to the blog articles on homegrownherbalist.net and do a search for leaky gut. You'll find an article that talks about it, but that can help a lot too. Okay. Marie says, in the 60-day guarantee, is it still valid if they bought it from Doc Jones? Even though he has a really handsome new part in his hair, is it still valid to get that warranty?
Absolutely. We want everybody to have that absolute ironclad. You've got to try that thing for 60 days. If it's not helping you, we don't want you to have it. These are expensive devices. They're expensive to make, but if it's not helping you, we buy it back. Do you know how many we've bought back over the last 3 years? Since we started making this Tuner Pro, we have less than 1% that ever comes back, and we're getting close to 3,000 of them out in the world.
Yeah. See, and what does that tell you? You know, that's amazing. The other thing is that it'll fix 10 other things. Even if it didn't fix one thing. Or their children will steal it. So,
you know, sometimes when they take it out the door, your children will benefit. But you know, the interesting thing is some people get it for chronic headaches. And they say, you know, my headaches have only dropped 50%, but this feels better and this feels better and this feels better. And I didn't really realize I had something that could help those. And so I feel great. I'm happy with it.
Yep. All right. Marie also asks if it would help trigeminal neuralgia. And I would think absolutely.
Yes, and that's, goodness, that's a great thing to talk about for just a minute if we could. There are conditions like trigeminal neuralgia that we're very successful with, but you have to be extremely careful with it. If you have complex regional pain syndrome or trigeminal neuralgia or some of the other real severe neuralgias, your brain has actually kind of flipped a switch and it's gone into complete all-out attack mode. That's the best way I can describe it. The brain says, if anything comes at that area that's super sensitive, I am going to throw everything I can at it because I've decided that everything that comes at that area is an attack. Same thing with that complex regional pain syndrome, an arm or a leg or part of the body that's decided everything that touches it is part of the enemy. With conditions like that, if you will use other areas of the body that don't hurt very much as a way to get our resonant forms in there, they will soon start playing interference with the pain signals that you're having in the area that's so painful. So we don't go right to that area and may not even go there for weeks or months if it's a severe case, but we'll treat all kinds of other parts of the body until the body starts turning down the signal saying, okay, I've decided this thing is not going to try and kill me. In fact, I kind of like how it makes me feel. Once the brain is accepting of it, you can start using it on those areas that are so very painful. And we have seen quite a few people with these chronic, most painful conditions known to man decrease the flames, decrease the fires, and start being able to get off of heavy medications as their body starts to accept that area again and starts to rain down the pain.
Yep. That's great. And I'll tell you something else that's really wonderful about Sherrick is that he's here to help you. You know, he does Zoom training meetings and he does YouTube videos and he has things on his websites. And if none of that helps, you know, shoot him an email and he'll help you with that. He's amazing. He has the same problem that I have, which is that we get a bazillion emails every day. And instead of making money, we answer emails. But we love you and we want to help you. That's the whole point. So that's what we do. And all right. So Joyce says, what's the best formula to treat chronic painful UTIs? I've got some herb things. We have one called kidney and bladder UTI, which of course stands for urinary tract, urinary tonic intervention, because we don't make any claims. But apparently there's other things that UTI can stand for. But anyway, that's a good formula. Take that with the immunity support. But have you had anything that way with the tuner, Sherrick?
Yeah, actually, recently we've been helping some people with conditions that they call a neurogenic bladder condition. And all that is a fancy way of saying that the nerve endings in that area are not happy. And if you understand that the vagus nerve, that's some of the bottom reaches that it goes to when it goes down from the brain stem and up into all the important structures here, but it goes all the way down to your bladder and all the way down to those important structures. And you can use the tuner just like we did on the belly button technique. You can do that exact technique just about 3 inches lower on the bladder and get those to start balancing better. I had a great discussion with a physical therapist today that came down from Montana. And he said, I've been working on this with people that have bladder issues, and it's helpful. It's extremely helpful. But we've been helping a lot of people with those neurogenic or painful bladder conditions by placing the device near it. And I don't know that we even talked about one of the best ways that we engage that vagus nerve. One of the oldest tricks in the book, and I didn't invent it, but somebody smarter than me did. If you just simply hum to the device when you've got it placed down at the bladder or at the belly button or other places, your hummer is a direct branch of that same vagus nerve. So you're slowing down your breathing, slowing down your heart rate, enhancing the strength of the vagus nerve while it's listening to this song coming up from the tuner that helps the brain connect with the bladder better. And everything can start working better. The tuner can't deal with infection stuff. It can't deal with the chronic infection, but it can sure help the vagus nerve function better, and the vagus nerve functioning better helps fight infection. Exactly. And it does a lot with those great herbs and nutrients that you can put into the system. So it's symbiotic. It works together.
Yeah. Well, and if we can turn off the sympathetic system, which is suppressing your immune system, you're not going to have as many bladder infections. It doesn't have to directly kill the bacteria. It just has to get your body what it needs so it can do its job. Yeah. I had a lady just yesterday, or maybe it was today. I've done a lot of consults this week. I don't know. Anyway, I was on the phone with this nice lady, and she said that she has to urinate all the time. And the first thing I thought was, we need to get a tuner on that belly and settle that bladder down, because there's nothing wrong with it. She doesn't have infections or anything. It's just irritated and confused and busy, and it needs to relax. So, all right. Cheryl says, I purchased one of your units and would like to know what frequencies it has and how to use the different modes. Do you leave them in one place as it goes through all the frequencies?
Great question. At first, I thought when you said it was Cheryl that maybe my wife had typed in and was trying to get in on the action and asked me a question, but she would have asked a question more like, "When are you going to finish up and come up and have dinner?" But no. So Cheryl, the question that you asked is, what is the tuner really doing? And I've posted a couple of videos recently on Instagram and I think on Facebook, maybe even on YouTube, that shows, because people get a little bit, they don't quite understand how things are measured. So our device, the actual cycles per second that the little Hummer is spinning ranges from about 44 cycles per second up to about 106 cycles per second. But what that creates on the harmonic code is ranging from 0 hertz up to over 1,000 hertz. It's creating an energy, if you will. I've got pictures of it. I wish I could pop it up here on the screen to show you, but we stuck it into a cool machine that could actually measure the energy that's created. And we see real white hot lines between this 44 and 106 hertz, but we also see these energy ripples and waves that go out in each direction down to 0 and all the way up over 1,000 hertz. It's essentially just creating rippling effects that allow the nervous system to start moving better. So it hits every frequency in the range of healing. It's actually based on the purr of a cat. It actually came from some of the conversations that Dr. Jones and I had. Do you remember that conversation? I asked you the difference between healing of dogs and cats. And you sat there and you thought, said, well, let me put it this way. In the last 23 years that I've been practicing, now I can't do it quite the way that you expressed that, but you said, in the last 23 years that I've been practicing, I've treated over 1,000 dogs for cancer. And then during that same time, I've treated maybe 5 cats for cancers. And you know, we had this really neat little conversation about the differences in healing. Well, those cats have a purr mechanism, and that purring mechanism actually is helpful in healing to other animals as well. Which is why, you know, a cat, if it's in the family and it senses somebody is sick, it'll often go and sit near that person, even if it doesn't like that person. It'll go and sit near them while they're sick, and it'll just purr and purr and purr, because it has this innate sense that it needs to help things heal. And that purring mechanism, it's those poor dogs, they don't have that. And that's why they seem to have a lot more cancers and other illnesses that they deal with. But anyway, I don't like, you know, the fur balls and things that cats get, and I don't like changing kitty litter, but that purr that they create helps speed up bone healing, and it speeds up stem cell activity, and it calms people down. And we've known that for years, but we just took that range of energy and put it into an electronic device and changed those energy fields. The device has 10 preset levels. So it goes from 44 cycles per second up to 106 cycles per second. But and then it has 4 algorithms, and each of those 4 algorithms takes those 10 levels and chops each level into about 300 energy points between each level. So those energy points, we feed back through the system in these loops. So that's what we actually did when we got your belly and that digestive system working again, is we fed it these about 3,000 energy levels every couple of minutes so that it started being able to move again. It was just these waves of energy that helped it start connecting. And as you hum to it, it helps it tie in to the vagus nerve. So it's literally a vagus nerve entrainment or tuning device.
Yeah. And You know, I'll
question.
tell you one more thing about the vibration. And by the way, this is the best cat you could ever own. You can pet them. They don't need a litter box. You don't have to feed them. They don't make you sneeze. So maybe the next one should have wings and a tail. Anyway, I'll tell you, the vibration thing's interesting. First of all, when you hum, one of the other things Sherrick used to always say is to bite your tongue gently, you know, put your tongue between your teeth. Because what does that do? Well, that tells your body, and in fact, I think it's your tongue telling your body, look, relax. I got teeth on both sides. Everybody relax. So it puts you into that parasympathetic phase. But the humming is interesting. And we were at a conference, I think this one was in Salt Lake, but he was working on a lady and he had her humming. And when I do acupuncture with tuning forks, I use different frequencies. And one of the frequencies is very grounding and peaceful and just calming, you know. It's just north of C sharp. Well, between C and C sharp. Anyway, it's a tone that whales make and wolves make and Tibetan monks make when they're chanting. You know, it's sort of the home frequency of this planet. And he's working on this lady with her tuner and having her hum. And I says, I just got to check. And I grabbed my tuning fork and whacked it, and she was right on pitch. I mean, she was humming exactly that tone. And so, you know, everything that's true connects with everything else that's true, you know, and that's one of the remarkable things about the tuner is that it does so many things, you know, in a different way mechanically, but that I was doing with the harmonic acupuncture stuff. You know, it's all truth, you know. And so it's been really cool to get that sort of validation. And anyway, it's interesting. All right. B Rose, who's my son-in-law, says, I'd love it if either of you could comment on the role of the primary cilium in this vibration therapy, if you get a chance. You have any opinions on that, Sherrick?
I'm not sure what it's referring to, so this must be in your ball court.
He's got a PhD in physiology. The primary cilium, of course, is the cilium that's more important than the secondary one. So that's why it helps with this. We have no idea, Brandon. Like my brother, the brain surgeon, said, we don't know how it works, but we can measure that it works. So, all right, next question. Lou says, that helps me understand why my stomach's upset. And I ended up with colitis after 30 years of pain. Yeah, he's the one that has the fibromyalgia because everything shuts down.
That's a constant dump of cortisol.
Yeah. Fight or flight. You get tired of it and your body wears out. Cheryl says, how do you know what frequency to use? What mode, right, to use?
I love that question. And the reality is that all of them are helpful. All of them are helpful. But there are going to be certain ones that you will say, that one speaks to me. And all you have to do is feel the device and run up and down the frequencies, or try, you know, each algorithm out. And your brain, your intuition is going to tell you that one feels good. And sometimes that's going to change. We have some individuals that have POTS, or postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and the system is really upside down. And we have to actually start them maybe at the lowest of all lowest levels, just to get their nervous system to start handling things. And if we take them up too strong, they're going to say, oh, I'm starting to feel more sick. And you take them down to the lowest level and they say, oh, I can breathe. That's how you know which level to use, is which one feels the best to you. because your brain, your body, your nervous system, they're going to tell you if you just listen to them. That's a great question.
And there are some basic guidelines in the little book that sort of talk about that. But listen to your body. You know, your body is, she'll tell you what to do.
Yeah.
And then, or send Sherrick an email and say, my guts don't work.
Absolutely. I've helped people face probably some of the worst conditions known to man with the device, and we've found ways to be successful with it. And then if it doesn't work for you, it's not going to hurt anything, but we're happy to buy them back. It's just not a problem.
Yep. Well, very good. So, and that's the last question.
Do
you have any other thoughts, Sherrick?
Let's see. I think you're offering a discount on the tuner, and that's a wonderful thing. There are so many things that that this machine was designed to do. It wasn't really designed by me. I'm just taking the information that I downloaded, and I've been trying to get engineers to understand how to put it together. But somebody smarter designed it. And I'm just grateful for how it helps people. But probably one of the funnest things to see is how it helps people find peace. The letters that I love receiving the most are ones that say, I really didn't expect this, but I was using it and I found myself crying. And 15 minutes later, I'm self-checking and analyzing, and I found that I feel a whole lot better about certain events that happened in my life. And I didn't expect that to happen. Yeah. And I just say a little prayer and say thank you, because I know that that was important for that individual. And I've felt that for me. I've seen that in my own family, and it just helps those emotional centers balance, which really are what helps a person long term to do a lot better. If it's only pain relief, I mean, I'm not all that excited just about pain relief, but I want a person after using it for a year to be able to say, I'm a better person. I feel better about the world. I'm happier with my family. And I don't know exactly how it does that, but somehow in balancing out the nervous system, people feel better about everything around them.
Yep. It's a remarkable tool. The Resx Tuner Pro. And we have them on the website, and Sherrick's got them on his website. And we are honored to be able to have it. It's a great tool. It can do a lot of things in situations where herbs aren't appropriate or allowed. And it's just really remarkable for helping the body transition, and the brain, and then, the endocrine system and everything else, transition into a parasympathetic, vagus dominant, everything's going to be okay mode, and it gives the body what it needs to quit running away from the lion that may not even be there anymore, and go into that parasympathetic, healing, regenerative, restorative condition. And it's really amazing. Just can't say enough good about it. We've been really, really impressed. Like Sherrick said, they've sold 3,000 of this new model, and they've had less than 1% of them come back. And so that's a testimony just in and of itself. So Sherrick, we love and appreciate you. You're doing great work. And thanks to all of you for coming and participating. If your question didn't get answered, shoot me an email and we'll figure it out. I'm Dr. Patrick Jones from the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine, and thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Sherrick, thanks a million. Hey, Doc Jones here from the HomeGrown Herbalist School, and today we're going to talk about sagebrush. So this is sagebrush, Artemisia tridentata, and Artemisia is, of course, after the Greek goddess Artemis,
And tridentata is because it has 3 teeth on its leaf, right? Tridentata. And usually when I pull off a leaf to show that, it doesn't have 3 teeth because plants can't count. But it's supposed to have 3 teeth on the leaf, and this one actually does, so good for him. This is a plant, it's in the wormwood family, and all of those plants are good for worms, intestinal parasites. This one is also useful as a bitter for digestive issues. It increases secretory activity of the stomach and the bowels. So for those kinds of indigestion and things, you would want to take a tea of this about a half hour before you eat. And basically what that does, I don't even know if there's any pharmacology there. It just basically tastes so awful that your mouth produces a lot more saliva and amylase and bicarbonate to apologize to your stomach for sending this horrible stuff down there. And as a result, you have better digestion. I think it does actually have some excretory stimulation too. But anyway, good as a digestive bitters. It's also pretty good for respiratory infections. Sometimes as a tea you can take it, but like I say, that's a truly awful experience. Just not good, you know what I mean? Sort of like licking a railroad tie, just not tasty. But the other thing you can do, if you can't stomach the tea, and a lot of people can't, is you can just put it in a pot and steam it, you know, and then get a towel or something and put it over your head and inhale those vapors. And that's good for respiratory congestion, bronchitis, colds, flus, stuff like that. Anyway, it's a very common plant, very easy to find, at least in the Rocky Mountain West here. This is kind of our dominant species. And so Artemisia tridentata, sagebrush. Don't stuff your turkey with it. Hi, Doc Jones here from the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine, and this is Teasel. So Teasel's a really tremendous plant medicinally, and this is a second-year plant. Teasel's a biennial. And this is a second-year dead old grandma. This plant's not even alive. This isn't the one you want, but this is the one you look for because it's easy to identify from the road. And then you look around the feet and you see the youngsters, right? This is a first-year Teasel plant, end of the first year, beginning of the second. So it's April now. So this is technically a second-year plant. But this is the one you want, okay? The root is the medicine. And Teasel has a biennial cycle. All right. And so that means it's a 2-year cycle. You know, annuals, every year they seed and flower and die, seed and flower and die, seed and flower and die. That's the annual cycle. The perennials, of course, come up from the same root every year, like, you know, tulips and dandelions and guys like that. They just keep coming from the same root. Biennials, the first year do a low leafy rosette kind of structure like this on the ground. And the second year they bolt up and flower, seed, and die. So some well-known biennials are Teasel, burdock is a biennial, you know, mullein is a biennial. There's a lot of them. But if the root's the medicine, it's important to harvest that root at the right time. So you want to harvest the root when it's as large as possible, but you also want to harvest it before that plant has bolted up to flower and seed, right? So either the fall of the first year or the spring of the second year, okay? So it's April in Idaho, and we're out here digging Teasel roots. So this is a second year, spring of the second year plant, right? And that's the root. See, so that's a pretty good root. And they tend to grow near water, so they're easy to dig up. Teasel's easy to identify. It has these very distinctive heads. In fact, they use these a lot in flower arrangements and ornamental, you know, flower stuff and decorating. The heads were actually used, and still are sometimes, for teasing wool, for carding wool. And they would make these elaborate, complicated brushes, you know, and it would comb out the wool. You know, one of the species of Teasel is Dipsacus fullorum, fullers, right? The fullers were the guys that made felt and things like that. So anyway, Teasel has a long history in manufacturing and industrial stuff. But it also has a long history as a medicinal. Now, I actually met this plant many years ago through sort of an unusual circumstance. I was actually driving down this very road, and saw the plant growing in the ditch bank. I had no idea what it was, but I saw it, and I felt this really compelling, overwhelming, impulse that I needed to get to know this plant. And the guy that was driving was actually a friend of mine. He's a plant scientist. And I said, hey, what is that plant? And he says, I don't know. And I said, you ought to go back to college and get your money back, He didn't know what it was. Anyway, about a week later, I saw it again on the property of a friend of mine, Stephen. He's also an herbalist. And I said, what is that plant? I had that same feeling that, holy cow, I got to get this. And he says, it's Teasel. I says, well, what's it good for? He says, well, I don't know that it's good for anything. I said, no, it's really good for something. And so I actually dug it up that day. I dug up some roots, started a tincture before I even knew what it was or what it was for, and got out all my old dusty herb books and started reading about Teasel. And sure enough, it's a medicinal plant, and sure enough, the root's the medicine. But it was used for nerve pain, for neuralgias and, odd nerve pain things. It's also used currently a lot for Lyme's disease. It's very good for Lyme's disease. It drives the spirochetes, the little bugs that cause Lyme disease, drives them out of the tissue where they like to hide into the circulation so that the white blood cells can kill them, So it's pretty good, part of a good protocol for Lyme's disease. But anyway, I didn't know anybody with weird nerve pain. I didn't know anybody with Lyme's disease. I didn't know what all the fuss was about. But the day I was pressing the tincture, 2 weeks later to the day, I was literally pressing the tincture. A lady walks into my clinic. She says, Doc, have you got anything I've got this horrible nerve pain. She was in a car accident years ago, and she had all this scar tissue and nerve entrapment and just had this horrible pain all the time. I'm pressing the Teasel tincture, and I says, maybe I do. And I gave her some, and it changed her life. I mean, it made it go away. And that's one of the very unique things about Teasel. Not always. But the Chinese name for Teasel is mend that which is broken in Chinese. Mend that which is broken. And in her case, it didn't just make the pain go away like, Skullcap would or valerian would, we got a lot of nerves for pain. It fixed it. It changed it. It somehow, I guess the best analogy is it rebooted her nervous system to remind those nerves that it wasn't their job to hurt all the time. Sometimes when we get an injury and a chronic injury, the nerve just kind of decides, that's my thing now, I guess, is just to hurt all day, every day. And it's sort of like your computer gets frozen on a screen and you got to turn it off and turn it back on to get it to think about what its job is again. And that's sort of how I think about Teasel. And it doesn't always do that. It's almost always good for pain, temporarily. I've used it as a tincture internally on pain cases. I've used it as a tincture topically on pain cases, where you just spray the tincture right on them. And it's very effective for lots of different kinds of pain, particularly if it's of nerve origin. But I've had a few cases where it actually stopped it. It actually turned it off and they were done. I also had a pretty remarkable case using Teasel on a young lady that had MS, multiple sclerosis. And I was at a conference, lecturing, and after the lecture she came up and she said, do you have anything for multiple sclerosis? And I says, I started to say, I really don't. I'm a veterinarian. Dogs don't get MS. I don't have a lot of experience with MS. I had never had a client with MS. And I was just about to explain all that to her, and I hear in the back of my head, nerve pain, dummy, right? Teasel's not always a gentle soul. She's kind of pokey, you can see. Anyway, and I thought, nerve pain? I said, I don't, maybe I do. Maybe I do. And I gave her a Teasel tincture, and she says, how should I take it? I says, I have no idea. I said, tell you what, take a drop 3 times a day, and increase by 1 drop every day. And if you get past 30 drops, call me, right? We don't want to get crazy with this, but let me know. So she called me, actually she emailed me about 2 weeks later, and she said, Doc, you've got to send me a picture of this plant. I don't ever want to be without this plant. Because it has, when I hit 14 drops 3 times a day, it's like somebody flipped a switch, and I feel way better, And this was a young lady, she was like late 20s, early 30s, just tragic. There were 2 or 3 days a week her husband would have to carry her to the shower because she was having a bad day, Little kids, it was awful. Anyway, the Teasel really helped her. And in fact, I was telling this story on a plant walk about a year later, and this little gal in the front row says, it was me, right? And she's out on the plant walk tromping around with us in the mountains, you know. And so, and she said that she was off a lot of her meds and she was feeling a lot better most of the time. It didn't cure her, it didn't kill the MS and, you know, cure that problem. But anyway, it made her feel much, much better, significantly better. So the root's the medicine. You know, there's an old idea in herbalism called the law of signatures, right? The law of signatures says that plants give us little hints about what they're for, right? You know, yellow herbs are good for liver things because your bile is yellow. You know, red herbs are good for cardiovascular stuff. Mullein leaves look like lungs. You know, there's all kinds of little hints that God puts into the plants, and whether that's a real thing or whether it's just a nice mnemonic device, I don't know. But I'll tell you what is Teasel saying? Teasel says, I hurt everywhere, right? I mean, the whole plant is covered with thorns. It's pokey every single place. Even the first year plants on the back of the leaf, and this is a good way to identify them, on the back of the leaf, they have a row of spines that'll poke you, you know? And so this is the first year plant. They have really crinkly kind of leaves. And they also have that row of spines on the leaf. And I don't know if you can see that or appreciate that, but there's spines along this midline vein. So that's the medicine. It's the root is the medicine. So this is what you want. You look for these guys and then you dig up these guys, harvest the roots. And of course, then you can do whatever you want with them. You can make a powder, make a tea, put them in capsules, put it in a tincture. It doesn't matter how you take the herb. But that's the medicine. Good for nerve pain, like I said. Good for Lyme's disease. I've had that one remarkable MS case. I don't know if I'll ever have another one, but she needed it. So try that and let me know. But anyway, Teasel. So I'm Doc Jones from the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine. Swing by our website, homegrownherbalist.net. We have a lot of, video content like this. We have blog articles. We have herbs and things you can purchase and kits. In fact, we got Teasel. You want some Teasel? We'll put a link right up there. You can click on that and buy some Teasel tincture. Anyway, Doc Jones, HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine. Thanks for watching. Hey, Doc Jones here from the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine. And this is California Poppy. So California Poppy is a Schultzia californica. And it's a poppy, like the poppies that they make opium out of and heroin and stuff. It's a very common wild plant in the western states, obviously in California, that's why they call it that, but you can find it in Utah and Arizona and places like that as well. I've never seen it in the wild, but it's easy to grow, and it's in a lot of places, if you're warm enough, it's a perennial. If it's too cold, then it's an annual, but it's a self-seeding annual in most cases, so you'll probably have it anyway, even though it's not overwintering as a root. So this is the flower. It's got 4 petals, which is typical of the family. And then as the flower petals fall off, you get this little cone-shaped seed pod, which extends and lengthens until you get this long seed pod that looks sort of like a banana. But, so what's it for? Well, what part do you use, first of all? You use the whole thing. All right, all the aerial parts of the plant, cut it right down to the dirt, and that's the medicine, okay? Leaf and flower at any stage. I usually harvest it when it's flowering, but you can harvest it whenever you want. And it's a narcotic, okay? And so it's, now before you get too excited and think the DEA is going to come over with flamethrowers and bulldozers, it's not that great of a narcotic, okay? So it's not a fun narcotic, it's a medicinal narcotic. And so, but it is good for pain. It's mildly sedating as well, so it's good for insomnia. It's good for anxiety and panic attacks, things like that. This is a plant you want to be a little careful with if you're combining it with other plants that are sedating, because you get a cumulative effect, right? So if you're taking a sleep aid, a pharmaceutical sleep aid, I wouldn't take valerian with that or California poppy with that or something, because you're going to get an additive effect. Also, these are plants that it'd probably be a great idea not to take right before you have general anesthesia, right? In fact, I recommend not doing anything herbal for about a week before you have any kind of surgical procedure. But yeah, so it's narcotic, it's sedating, it's calming, it's good for pain as well. Did I say that? Pain is good. I mean, it's good for pain. Pain's not good. But and you can use it as a tincture. You can make a tea. It's safe enough and mild enough that you can use it even on small children. Okay, so it's not a dangerous, potentially addictive thing like its, Afghanistani cousins are. It's a very mild, safe plant. There's one difficulty with it is if you are giving it to a child, it takes 3 adults to do that. 2 of them to hold the child and the other one to give him the stuff because it tastes really, really awful. But other than that, you can work through that. Yeah, great plant. It's also good topically. It has some antifungal and antibacterial properties. So if people use it for like ringworm, sometimes when other things won't work, this will work on ringworm. Or if you have a persistent infection on your skin, that might be good for that too. Anyway, the whole plant's the medicine, like I said. You can tincture it fresh. You can dry it and tincture it. You can make a tea. You can put it in capsules. You can do whatever you want to get it into you. But California poppy.
Hi, I'm Dr. Patrick Jones from the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine. And these are onions. I don't even know what kind they are, and I don't really care. They're just onions. Allium cepa is the species. But, the kind of onions you get at the restaurant, the kind of onions you put on your sandwich and in your soups. I'm going to tell you a little secret. Onions are a tremendous herbal medicine. That's right. You've heard of garlic, right? I mean, garlic's good for about everything. Well, guess what? Onions are too. Allium sativa is garlic. Allium cepa is onions, and they're cousins. They have very, very similar properties. They're antibiotic. They're anti-inflammatory. They lower cholesterol. They're just amazing for really a lot of things. But the thing that I've used them more than anything for is for earaches. That's right. Onions are really, really great for earaches. And I can tell you I'm a specialist on this because we had 15 kids in our family, and I counted once, and it was about 23 years. Some of them didn't do whatever I told them, and so there weren't 30 years, but there was a lot of years nonetheless. And if they'd get an earache, I could fix it every time. It's super simple. This is what you have to have. You have to have a kid with an earache. You have to have a couch. You have to have a Lion King video and an onion. And so this is how you do it. You take the onion and you grind it up. Just put it in your blender, make onion mush, and then squeeze it through a handkerchief to get the juice, all right? Then you take the kid with the earache and you lay him on the couch with his bad ear up. You squirt the onion juice in his ear, you press play on the Lion King video, and before Mufasa is holding little Simba up so all the zebras can dance for him, that earache's gone. Every time. I've done this, I can't even tell you, countless times, and I've never once had that earache need to be treated again. So, the anti-inflammatory properties, the antibiotic properties, it's just really a fantastic local cure for an earache. It doesn't matter what kind of an onion you have. It can be a red one, it can be a white one, it can be a sweet onion, it can be a regular onion. Doesn't matter at all. The onion juice is the medicine, and great for earaches, and great for about everything else too. I'm Doc Jones from the HomeGrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, click the button. If you like saving lots of money on doctor visits because you got an onion, click the button. And like and subscribe. We sure appreciate it. Share it with your friends. Maybe they got kids with ears. I'm Doc Jones. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.